Good afternoon. We will reconvene the Board of Regents meeting, and we will start the Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee meeting, which is chaired by Regent Shetler. So I will turn the meeting over to you, Regent Shetler.
Thank you, Regent Schauer, and welcome to the WSU Board of Regents Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee meeting. Today we have one information item, two discussion items, and one action item. So we'll start with the information item presented by Vice President of External Affairs and Government Relations, Linda Becker-Fenter, who will provide a state legislative update.
He's not excited like that.
You'll see what the president had for lunch. There you go.
Hi there, my name is Glenda Becker-Fenter. I'm the new Vice President for External Affairs and Government Relations for WSU. First time presenting before you, although I've met some of you before. I'm happy to be here. I wanted to give you, we actually are in a unique opportunity. This will be the first time in my career working in state and federal politics where the state budget and the federal budget are being finalized at the same time. So, which shouldn't happen in the federal government. That's supposed to happen on September 30th, but that's a topic for another day. So I'm going to start with some outcomes from the work that our state team has done in Olympia, and the session is adjourning today. So, we were operating under a very austere budget situation with the supplemental request. But we did have some successes this year, and I want to make sure to highlight those and thank the team for all the work they did to get us to that point. We were able to fund $2.5 million on a one-time year basis just for this year of the $4.9 million we requested to support the collective bargaining agreement for our graduate students. This funding will cover fiscal years 24 and 25. We received a little under $7 million in one-time Climate Commitment Act revenues to allow us to continue to participate in the carbon allowance auctions. We also got $500,000 to support an expansion of our Native American scholarship program. We did not get funding for our supply chain management programs in Vancouver and Everett this year. Those are our requests from WSU. In addition, we had some legislative projects that were brought to us, including a funding to support a new digital literacy coordinator in Extension, expand capacity for a lab in Pullman that analyzes law enforcement body-worn cameras, and a few other small arrays of assignments, including, not necessarily small, but $10 million to fund a digester on our campus in Pullman for the dairy. We also worked collaboratively with University of Washington to get name, image, and likeness legislation passed through the state legislature that will allow our athletics faculty to actually work more closely with our student athletes and helping them be prepared for opportunities that may come along. That's actually a pretty good opportunity for us. And then also, we do spend both in Olympia and in Washington, D.C. a lot of time playing defense. And so a couple of things that we were able to push back on and work with our legislative champions on were legislation that would have micromanaged our admissions processes and threatened reciprocity agreements for our global campuses. And we were able to effectively kill those bills in Olympia. On the little p political side of things, we're going to see some changes in Olympia, as we all know. Two prominent Cougs are retiring, including Senator Sam Hunt from Olympia and House Republican leader J.T. Wilcox from Pierce County. Senator Vandeweghe, who actually graduated from our global campus, is running for the Commissioner of Lands position. We also are losing, they're not Cougs, but we're losing, they didn't graduate from WSU, they may be Cougs at heart, but we're losing Senator Billig and Senator Wilson Senator Billig from Spokane and Senator Wilson from Vancouver. Representative Marcus Riccelli has announced that he's going to run for Senator Billig's spot up there, and there's two candidates running for Representative Riccelli's seat. We're still combing through the budget. There'll be more information coming. We're going to be sharing this out through a larger publication to the university, to faculty and staff later on, probably next week. On the federal side, six of the bills that fund the federal government were passed out of the House and Senate this week. We're expecting the president to sign those bills as soon as tomorrow. WSU submitted 4 earmarks, direct funding requests in those packages, in the first 6 packages, and all of them were funded this year for $16 million to go to WSU to help with campus security in Pullman, our facilities in Prosser, partnered with ARS to help support some of the work we're doing in nuclear sciences and equipment for a microscope. We also have one additional request in play in the next round of bills that are going through that will support our Native American Health Sciences program in Spokane. We were able to fully fund our SAF program, the Ascent program, which was actually cut to 0 in the House, and our team worked with the coalition to get that number back up in the Senate, and it survived through the process. All of our priorities in agriculture continue to be funded. We have new funding in energy to help support nuclear workforce certification. And there's actually language that Senator Murray has put in the Commerce bill to help support the outgrowth of NASA, the NASA program in the state of Washington. So we had, in those 6 bills, at least we had a fairly good outcome considering the situation that Washington, D.C. is under. There'll be 6 more bills that will come out and should need to be finished by March 22nd. And in those will be Department of Defense, Department of Education, Health and Human Services, which funds NIH and a lot of our work that supports the Health Sciences campus. And tonight, as a lot of you probably know, is the President's State of the Union. So that is the trigger for his budget to come out, which will really truly start the FY25 appropriations process in Washington, D.C. I also wanted to let you know that we've had a lot of visits to Washington, D.C. in the past 3 months. We've had 12 so far, including the 6 students from ASWSU Pullman's organization. They had great visits for 2 days. We have OR coming next week. Cass is coming to participate in the National Humanities Day. And our second annual leadership visit with our chancellors and president will be the first week of April. In addition, we're working on some regional projects too. Dana Ulrich, our Director of Regional Relations, has been leading a program with Snohomish County to build out a repository for sustainable aviation fuels. We're working very closely with the Office of Research and WSU Tri-Cities on this, and there's a lot of opportunity for us to continue to grow our work and staff there as well. So that's just an overview of what's been going on in Eager. I'm happy to answer any questions. The team's really excited to be moving forward, and we've been led well for the past year. I think that we're all really eager to kind of get into it and see how we can help support and serve our students, faculty, research, and staff going forward. So thank you for the opportunity. Any questions? Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I just, want to make sure we pause just for a minute. You ran through those numbers really fast.
I did.
But $16 million in earmarks, including the new transmission electron microscope that we have been working really hard to find funding for a long time. And you just run through those different kind of things. It's easy to go, well, of course, we got the money and move on to our next agenda item. But these are investments in our research infrastructure, safety on our campus, things like that. And then the $2.5 million from the state to help fund our graduate student stipend request. I just, I'll talk about this more in my remarks, but our state relations team under Glenda's leadership and Chris Mulick did a great job of advancing that. And, there were some nights I didn't sleep real well because I wasn't sure where it was going to come out. It's easy to go, well, it's only 1 year. It's only for the next 2 fiscal years or whatever. But this gives us an opportunity to go back and show that positive impact in a longer legislative session. So I just think we had some real successes here that I just want to make sure we take a little bit of time to celebrate because they are really critical investments in Washington State University.
What's about what's the security piece about for the campus?
Oh, for the campus? That was a congressionally directed project that went through Congresswoman McMorris Rogers to help in reaction to the murders that happened in Idaho, to help with video cameras in open areas that are currently dark and provide funding for card swipes. So we actually had a larger request that went through. It ended up being a $3 million funded project that will be signed this week. And then we'll work through the Department of Justice like a normal grant to get that funding out to our chief of police, who will then has a plan and is working with the campus leadership to get that in the appropriate places.
Okay. So are the card swipes going to be on all buildings or is it just on?
This won't fund all of them.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a lot of buildings.
Yeah, the plan was for this to be, and I'm sure Chief Jenkins, he and I briefly talked this week about this. The plan was for this to be a first step, and then we've been helping them look for other competitive funding and other ways that we might be able to support that.
Thank you.
So Linda, I think Kirk's comments are really interesting, and there's going to be a massive amount of political power shifting at the state level and now at the federal level with CMR not going back and running again. And knowing where Murray and Cantwell might be, I mean, we have been afforded in the state of Washington leadership at both the state of Washington level, in particular Eastern Washington leadership. So not having someone in the majority in one of the four corners in this for kind of the Pullman Spokane area, this will be the first time in decades with Andy's departure now after Lisa Brown and Jim West and others. So and then I just think about what the exposure might look like long-term relationship wise for the state and WSU's representation at that federal level. So kind of what's your long-term strategy? I applaud Kirk. We asked you about 5 years ago to dig into those relationships at the state level. You worked really hard at that and it matters. Mm-hmm. But I'm very anxious around what that looks like for WSU as things kind of shift at state and federal level.
I think one thing that I have learned over the years is it is about relationship building and about education and connecting the dots between what that elected official is interested in and what is important to us as either an institution or when I was a contract lobbyist, my clients. And I think we have a good story to tell with our with what we're doing at Washington State University, regardless of who what the party affiliation is of the elected official. At the end of the day, they're Washingtonians and they're Cougs, or they're not Cougs, but they support WSU because their constituents are. And so I think it's partly how we connect the dots with our story and our priorities with the members that are elected. I agree with you. We're going to have a big hole.
Such influence.
Yeah, I mean, we're losing a chair. We'll still have, potentially two chairs or ranking members in the Senate. We will likely gain two chairs in the House if the House flips, because we'll have Adam Smith, who's currently the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, and Rick Larson, who's currently the ranking member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. All of this is going to play out in the state legislature too, and the expertise that Chris and Connor bring to the table in navigating who these individuals are and who we need to continue to build relationships, not only around our campuses, but around the state to support the citizens of the state, I think is going to be something we're going to be working on. So we're ready to go the day after the election.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll make a comment on that as well. I think, Linda, you've done a amazing job during my tenure here at ensuring we have relationships both sides of the aisle across the entire state, that we don't just visit people that we think are going to give us money. And I know some of the universities don't operate that way, but we have relationships with all of those because you never know when we're going to need that, or you have a changeover and things like that. I don't want to dismiss Marty's concern because it's huge, but I think if we didn't have relationships, it would be even a bigger step up because we don't have that advocacy. Second thing is, we've been able to utilize the power of the fact that we have these campuses across the state and extension to remind every member of Congress that there is a piece of WSU in their particular area. And I think that's also been really powerful. that is not just Eastern Washington, but those other campuses as well.
And I will say that IR has done a really fantastic job of pulling together by congressional district. So you can see how many students are in each individual congressional district now.
Very
And
focused.
I think I told Chancellor Netzhammer when I was down there earlier this year that the Vancouver area may have the largest number of Cougs in the state, because there's Cougs on campus in Vancouver, and then their constituents are going to Pullman. So it surprised me, because you would think it would be the 5th congressional district with Pullman and Spokane, but those numbers are really key, because you have members that don't actually have a physical campus in their district, yet they have constituents that are attending one of our campuses, and the decisions they make, whether they're in the state legislature or in the United States Congress, make an impact to their constituents. So we try to bring it back to them. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
You said IR, what?
Oh, institutional research, sorry. Okay.
Other comments or questions? Glenda, thank you. Excellent report. I also like to thank the Regents and President Schultz for your comments. Super valuable. We will now move on to our next items, which are our 2 discussion items today. The first discussion item is the research overview and expenditure report presented by Elizabeth Chilton and Interim Vice President for Research, Mike Walcott. And then Elizabeth will stay in her chair and she will give us an update on the second discussion item on free speech and campus safety on the Pullman campus.
I will pass the microphone to Interim Vice President Michael Wolcott.
Right. Thanks, Elizabeth. My name is Michael Wolcott. I'm a Regents professor in the College of Engineering and Interim Vice President for Research. I want to start off real quick to just familiarize a little bit with research. You know, research is one of our 3 primary missions. All tenured and tenure track faculty are evaluated individually on the productivity of their research. On this, that's how they achieve tenure on those sort of pieces. And, really the research enterprise on an individual basis, they're given an office, they're given a telephone, they're given courses to teach, and they have to go build a business. And that business is the research enterprise that they do. And we're the stewards of that research enterprise. We service their activities to help them facilitate their research pieces, but it's really a part of every faculty's individual. We do that from a basis of moving grants or moving proposals out, moving grants in, research assurances, which are compliance to federal regulations across a whole host of different aspects to that. We run the campus vet to take care of the animals that are part of research, commercialization, the development of intellectual property, the securing of that intellectual property through patents, licensing, and commercialization, advancement to help build teams to better compete for research, both in general, but also in national lab partnerships for that. And we run a host of different centers and institutes which service research across campuses, colleges on that are multidisciplinary. So I want to give you some updates on the numbers of these HERD reports and explain a little bit about what these HERD numbers are for. If I can make this, yep, here we go. So HERD is a report that's run by the National Science Foundation. It's reported, every research institution is mandatory to report these numbers that are associated with research components to the NSF, and then they publish these numbers and rank them. The 2022, FY 2022 recently came out. We recently turned in our FY 23 numbers, but they're not yet approved by there, so we're not going to discuss those. These funding sources that they require to be reported include federal government funding, state and local government funding, institutional funds that go towards research, business funding, and a host of other sources, including nonprofits and corporations and so on and so forth. So these are historical numbers with the FY22 numbers that were just recently published on the right-hand side for this. And what we see is that, in general, we've been on an increasing trend on our research expenditures since 2008 on that. So if you look at at those numbers, we've increased from 277 million in 2008 to 368 million in 2022. Those are actual dollars, but if you look at this from inflation and adjusted dollars, we've actually not kept up with inflation. That number would have been 376 if we did. So while we're increasing on this basis, we're not keeping up with inflation on that basis. If we sort of dissect though where these are, the federal dollars, which are the orange at the bottom of these charts here, these bars, those dollars are federal dollars which we compete for. So we apply for a grant to the federal government, different agencies, and compete against other institutions, and we either win those or don't. So when you look at those bases, we've increased from 2008 at $91 million to nearly doubling of that to $180 million in 2022. So it's a very successful, sort of increase. And even adjusting for inflation, we've increased 50%. So really outstanding activity from our faculty in this manner. The state dollars have been relatively, in comparison to state dollars, have been relatively flat. It was 50 million in 2008 and it's 54 in 22. And if you adjust those for inflation, we've actually decreased, the state support decreased by 20%. Institutional support are a whole host of different aspects in terms of unrecovered indirect costs that we have, cost sharing, and a host of what's called institutionally focused, which can be distinguished professorships, startup funds, sabbatical leaves, things along this line that go towards the institutional contributions towards there. So when you look at those dollars, we've gone from 110 to 103, so it's decreased slightly in actual dollars, but in inflation adjusted dollars, we've actually decreased 50% in terms of those dollars. So despite the fact that we have an increase and we have a dramatic increase in federally competed funds for there, a lot of these other categories have been more difficult on there.
Wait, can you just, and this may not be a fair question, but I'm looking at that green line on the top that's disappeared.
Yeah.
All other, do you have any sense what happened there?
I think that, so we've been working, so these numbers are done in conjunction with the Office of Research, but also institutional research on there. And we've been working heavily. We've been working again with the influx of Workday, an actual working Workday now that we depend upon to kind of redo these again in this. And I think that basically that was a lump all of other funds. And I think now through the years, we've incorporated those into the other categories more closely.
Thank you. That's a
just
good way to have things done.
Yes,
The way I've
absolutely.
actually got them in the right place now.
Yes.
I think it's important to point out that other than the federal grants and contracts, everything else is self-reported by institutions. And while they give you guidelines, having been at 3 public institutions, I can say that it's not done exactly the same way at every one. So the fact that we've cleaned up our reporting through Workday, it's just going to make sure that we represent our research portfolio well.
Yeah, I think the processes, and I really got to hand it to institutional research. Leslie's group been working with us on these aspects. It's really important. It's important to get, I think, transparent with our faculty, reproducible and defensible numbers of each one of these categories. It's really, really important for that. And one of the reasons it's important is it's kind of a black box to faculty. And if they see a black box and they don't understand something, they'll make up what it's going to be. And then secondly is that if we don't track these things in numbers that we can control, we don't know how to improve or where we're falling short. So it's really important information, associated with those aspects.
Can you go back to that? I'll just make a short comment, just for background. A lot of the ag research funds are buried in these graphs, but you'll notice the yellow bar is about even, and that's people like the Wheat Commission or the Potato Commission, people like that. That's a pretty consistent number. And the Fed approps, that has held a fairly constant. The grants and contracts, just to give a shout out to our talented faculty, about the beginning of the graph was about the time if you remember the dust up in Congress that earmarks caused all the problems. And get rid of earmarks, the federal budget will just be balanced. And true or not true, it doesn't really matter. Earmarks went away. So we made a bet about then that our faculty, we could go to Congress and establish a competitive grant process instead of just going to your favorite congressman for earmarks. So a lot of the things in Pullman were earmarked up until then. Since that time, faculty has had to compete for competitive grants, and we thought they do pretty well nationally. It's obvious that they have. And that's why we tend to lead the way on federal funding in ag research because of our talented faculty.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right on those sort of pieces, but we also work very closely with Glinda's team on this. It's critical sort of, the federal government, make sure our priorities, what we compete well in, what's important to our state in terms of the research that carries us forward is actually being funded by the federal government and is important to them too. So there's really a kind of two-way conversation with that. Glenn and I worked for years together before we were in these offices on this and supporting efforts across DOE and the FAA. And it's a really important partnership along the line for that because you can go in and influence it. The better you are at your research, the more influence you have with the federal government in these pieces to help guide them and where our nation goes forward, and it's better to help our state represented in that federal government. So how do we stand according to our peers? So with these FY22 herd numbers, we're 77th. We actually increased one basis from 78 to 77th in the national herd ranking on this. And our institutional peers that we use for strategic planning, we're number 9 in that sort of basis. So Kirk and I are both alums of Virginia Tech, so we like to compare ourselves to Virginia Tech a lot of times in this. And what we see is that we're probably about 60% of the expenditures of Virginia Tech. But if we look at on a per tenure track basis, because all these universities are not the same size, we're actually 5th in our ranking. And Kirk, we're better than Virginia Tech in this case.
In Oregon State.
And Oregon State, we're better both than Oregon State.
But not as good as University of Maryland.
But not Maryland. But they bought another campus to kind of jack up their numbers. I'm just saying. So anyway.
Yeah, but then don't you have to divide by the number of faculty that were on the new campus? So I buy that on per capita.
Yeah, I know, and there are ways about that. What's really kind of interesting in this by tenure, this normalized figure is that you see in the area of the ranking that we're in, the expenditures by faculty are not that dramatically different in terms of these components too there. I mean, there are differences that separate us, but they're not nearly as dramatic as you are in the just total numbers associated with that.
One question I've got as far as the amount of research expenditures, do you have a breakout of where that's coming from, the various units? Because one of the things, I was joking about the University of Maryland thing, but they've had a well-established medical school for many, many years.
Yeah.
And what I'm wondering is if part of that, comes from the medical school and that ultimately that's a track that we will be on as we move to the future.
Well, certainly that's a great potential. HHS in general has about half of the federal research budget. Half of the federal research budget. In 2022, the largest agency we drew from was actually USDA, which is number 4 on there. So what that says is we have great potential in expanding in HHS. HHS historically has been the highest for funding for WSU on this area. We've had a crossover in the last couple of years associated with that. But certainly there's great potential in growing that number. So going back to this number here, this rise and this, sitting 5th in this sort of basis, ahead of Virginia Tech, this goes to, Cougar pride of always punching above our weight, right? But when we look at sort of how this goes on aspects here, the red is our HERD R&D expenditures across the years in millions of dollars. And the blue line are unique proposal PIs. So how many unique PIs actually submitted proposals from there? And so we see trends going in opposite directions. So fewer and fewer faculty are pulling more and more of the weight. And this is an unsustainable trend associated with that. And so we don't know exactly why this is. We're trying to look at some of the data, but certainly, you know, just given the scenario of our decreasing faculty, this is representative of that sort of basis, and just a higher teaching load because the number of courses don't change with decreasing faculty. It takes up more and more of their time.
Are there other factors? I mean, I think that's a very obvious one, obviously, but is that the sole factor?
No, I said we're not sure of all the factors on there in terms of who they've affected the most or so on and so forth. But this has been a continual trend on this. We've done a little bit more on this aspect because the other part is we've grown our large research program projects. These are proposals and grants that are greater than $3 million. We've grown those significantly over time. So we're applying for more and more ones which have multiple PIs and co-PIs. So one of the thoughts that I had on this was, well, maybe there's not as many principal investigators because there can only be one principal investigator, and then there's multiple co-principals investigators. We have looked at that, but we see a similar trend.
Can you just go back and, I am hearing headlines that I just want to make sure that I understand. So there's less faculty producing more research.
Yes.
There is less faculty and that faculty that's producing more research, one of those takeaways is their teaching load is also not decreasing. So we're asking them to do more and to achieve greater expenditures in research.
Right.
I would just add, that's an hypothesis.
Yeah.
I don't think we have the data to show that. You know what, we haven't looked at what are the course loads of active PIs. We haven't looked at how declining enrollment has affected the numbers of classes we teach. So I think these are the kinds of questions that we can use to dig into what is causing this trend. I think it's fair to say, though, that we don't really know. The biggest predictor of getting a federal grant is whether you've gotten one before, statistically significant. And so what this is showing is that our successful PIs are going back to the well and getting bigger and bigger grants. Question is, what about the others? Are there impediments to other faculty applying? This is submission of proposals or awards?
It's unique proposal PIs, not
awards,
PIs,
okay.
but it mimics. So we've also analyzed data, proposal PIs versus grant PIs. It's very similar to that. It's remarkable how constant it is across the years in terms of those pieces. So they do mirror one another.
I think we need to look into it. I think we really don't know.
And what are the trends? So I would be interested to go back up to the 4 institutions above us in peer ranking. What are they seeing trend-wise from a HERD R&D to a unique proposal PI2? I'd like to see what others.
That data is not transparent to us.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to get that kind of granular information from our peers.
It's just that's a very broad statement, and we've been not super great on some of our statistical broad statements we've made recently around statistical data that is actually supported with data. So I want to make sure we're careful to not just generalize what is causing that trend.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Mike, you might also discuss, there is a unit in your area and office that works with faculty on these really large proposals too. And so it's not accidental that there are larger proposals. It's not just quality of faculty, but there is a actual unit to support the complexity of submitting those successful proposals that I think has a very high success rate too when they work with faculty.
Yeah, we have an Office of Research Advancement where we have grant writers in those. those help to build teams, both that and the Office of National Lab Partnerships do that, more around sort of the Department of Energy and those types of DoD activities for there. So what they do is try to help put teams of faculty together. Federal research trends have been going more towards, societal problems, and societal problems are not unique to individual disciplines. And so many of these larger research programs require getting individuals from different departments, different colleges, oftentimes different campuses of expertise together to work collectively on these. And both from a proposal preparation side, but then helping to support those teams after the fact to do that. So it is an area, because the trend has been going like that in the federal government. We've also been responding to that in the Office of Research to continue to build, that activity, and they have been, they've been very successful at that.
I hear what you're saying on the availability of data, but I think this would be an interesting area to look at what data is available across institutions, and then perhaps use, I mean, this would probably be a good place for AI actually to use the data that's available across institutions to run some scenarios on what the potential future success rates of various strategies could be, because things are going to continue to evolve, and trying to get ahead, there's sort of differentials on how some of these different institutions have gone at different rates in terms of either becoming more successful over time or less successful over time per faculty member, and just understanding kind of how we might scenario plan for the future there would be interesting. And I think, testing some of our assumptions, looking at sort of the back forecast as well could be interesting, to Murray's point. But there's going to be, I think, some opportunities to try some different things, and to continue to test some of our hypotheses with some of the data. But I would guess that the data is available for what's been successful, even if you can't tell what proposals they're putting in. You can probably tell what they're getting granted, right?
Yes, exactly. I was going to suggest that for award data, we can get access.
Yeah, actually, I have about a 30-slide deck in my computer right now with award data on there.
Yeah.
So that's a, so we work with institutional research on the actual expenditures, right? But the awards go through our office, and so we have, databases on that, and we have, significant amount of analysis within that. So by agency, by college, by department, by, top ranking PIs,
But for peers, but I think
Yeah,
Redmond
it's
is
just-
suggesting we could get that data for peers, and I think academic analytics is going to be helpful in this, because we can look at the award by PIs and compare ourselves to whatever institutions we want to compare ourselves to. So I think that is an exercise we could bring back to you to really dig into what is, at least what are the data informed hypotheses about what's causing that downturn. I think we could do some surveying of faculty too, internally, in fields where we're seeing a significant drop. So for example, in that decline of numbers of PIs, are we seeing that happening in pockets of disciplines? Like, are those mostly natural scientists, or those mostly engineers, or, who are they?
Yeah.
And really dig in.
And looking forward too, because I think what's interesting is, asking, if you had a foundation model, for example, if you asked a question, what will be the successful strategy in the future, and then get an answer to that question, you might agree with that answer and think it's, giving you the wrong answer and want to ask a different question, but at least you could think outside the box a little bit, maybe try some different stuff.
The research is so significantly important to what we're doing and what we're delivering that I think understanding the data, what the data means, and then how we make decisions utilizing that data, the data informed. It sounds like there's a good idea about how to dig into this. I would like to suggest that we come back again at the next meeting because it is so important for us to continue to understand research expenditures and our faculty ratios and how to make sure that we're supporting them in the way that we can. I don't know what you think maybe we can bring back at the next meeting, but that this feels really important and timely.
So, sorry, just, I do want to reinforce the recognition and the thanks to the faculty for that just tremendous, level of productivity and performance. This might be way off, but one of the stories I hear from competing institutions is the output in terms of patents and licenses and that sort of thing. So if you do come back with regards to data and baseline, I guess I'm just trying to understand how that fits in the scope of research as well.
Yeah, and we do have, we have data on vintage disclosures over time, patents, over time, licensing, revenues from licensing, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
That's all within the Office of Research, and we have another 30 slide deck on that one too.
Well, I mean, there is a humble nature of WSU. And I'm out and about and I see other peer institutions telling their story. And that is a highlighted component of their story. So maybe just another data refresh would be great.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I actually just had one more slide I want to get to. I mean, one of the pieces here is and I think that's been mentioned here in terms of looking to the future. And so doing strategic planning about understanding what are our strengths and how do we focus on those, and what are strengths that are really shared and multidisciplinary across the systems as a whole, that we can sort of build these functioning, high-performing teams and focus our efforts in those directions, especially, not only, but especially in those areas that we can be most productive, are important pieces to that. So we're a part of the strategic planning program. We've polled our deans, our chairs. We're having a listening session with our faculty on some of these pieces. We've crossed this to the chancellors in there, come up with a set of strengths that are listed up here that are common across the areas for these, and in these components that are more shared and multidisciplinary, aside from specific areas of research that we see in our strengths. So the better we can understand this, the better we are. We've also formed a research competitiveness working group that's comprised of leading faculty within the research community at WSU. And they're being charged with this to sort of, help to advise a path forward. We have folks from every college and every campus represented on it. So.
Can I ask for one other piece that sort of goes to Regent Ramos' thing? On the patents, intellectual property in general, I'd be interested to learn the process. How many does WSU actually decide to go forward with patenting? And is it sort of related to the strategic thrusts, and how that integrates with our people in industrial relations and so forth? To understand, because as you know, it's extremely expensive to patent and maintain a patent. So at some point there needs to be a decision-making process.
Yeah, so there is a disclosure. So of course, your history with the national labs, right? It's not necessarily unlike that in terms of, there's a disclosure of an intellectual property from a faculty member or student or a postdoc, and that goes into the office. There's a team then that assesses the marketability or the applicability or patentability, or if there's a copyright potential associated with that piece. There's a market potential that's developed in terms of understanding, is it worth investing in? We do have some, not a lot, but we do have some internal investment for patenting on that sort of basis. As it moves through provisional to full patents and the costs get higher, and do we go to the international patents or not, sort of thing. the market potential really has to be secured much more fully. We try to secure partners in the industrial right up front in this to help along those lines, and then they essentially go out and then get licensed in this. And so we have some that have been quite profitable in this and bring in a fair bit. We have others that also have a fair bit of litigation associated with them to protect the patents on those, and so that's part of the office's budget also on those pieces. The revenues from the royalties are distributed across the area. We've actually analyzed it with peers and quite generous actually to the inventor compared to many of our peers on this, but they get distributed across colleges and campuses.
It might be just interesting to put together a little bit of data portfolio to show trends and, and how it's looking towards the future.
And I
along
do
with
have some of
the
this.
other data items that we've talked about.
Yeah. Great.
Any other comments or questions for Mike or Elizabeth?
Good report. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Excellent work. And we will come back with more data at our next meeting, Regent Shower. And now, Elizabeth, do you want to walk us through free speech and campus safety on the Pullman campus?
Absolutely. So thank you. So given the strong national attention to issues surrounding freedom of speech on college campuses, Regent Keohukalo Shower and President Schultz had asked me to provide an update on what we're doing in this context on the Pullman campus and within our system. So I'll share a few things with you here today, but also I believe that my Chief of Staff, Haley James, for the Pullman campus is on the Zoom there, as well as Vice Chancellor Lisa Guerrero and Vice Chancellor Jenna Hyatt. They've all participated in pulling these resources together, and so we're all available to answer questions after I give you a brief overview. I also know our other chancellors are here, who they might be able to shed some light on how this is playing out on their campuses and what they're doing as well. So, with the increase in divisive incidents happening around the world, especially since October 7th, but really before that, on the Pullman campus, we started to see increased inquiries into what kind of speech and in what formats fall under First Amendment protections. And our Office of Compliance and Civil Rights is currently working with marketing and communications on a system-wide website to be able to provide additional information and for media inquiries. But in the meantime, my team built a website on the WSU Pullman Chancellor's website. I myself did receive media requests. What are we doing to protect free speech on campus? And I wanted to be able to, for faculty, staff, students, and external community members, be able to refer them to what all of our policies are. I should say that we have a number of policies and programs that protect free speech in one way or another, but they aren't always necessarily easy to find in one place. And so the idea behind creating this website was to connect and link to all of the resources that we have. So the website, this is new, and you can see it at, trying to remember what, it's freespeech.wsu.edu. So please do go to it. It's relatively new, and if you see things that you have an FAQ that's not there, or you see things, resources that you'd suggest we add, please do. But the website begins with a statement of commitment, and this is the only part I'm going to read to you. It says, as an academic institution, freedom of speech and expression is essential to who we are. We aspire to be an affirming community that encourages respect and learning, where we can engage in diverse viewpoints. Throughout the academic year and beyond, students, faculty, and staff are likely to encounter those who share viewpoints different from their own. While we hope that this discourse can happen in a respectful manner, it may be important to remind our community of WSU's guidance around free speech. And so we also say, if you or a member of our community feels they've been harassed or discriminated against, we immediately send them to compliance and civil rights. So we provide that there. So in addition to the opening statement, the website hosts a comprehensive suite of information and resources, including support resources. And we sort of parse it out by what's the definition of freedom of speech, and then for students, for employees, for instructors, and then free speech, frequently asked questions. And so as you click on each of these tabs, it opens up and provides you with a list of resources. So as I mentioned, we have a number of policies and guidelines in place, and all of these are referenced on the website and will be at the system level website as well. So I just really want to point out a few Washington State and WSU policies that govern our approach to free speech. First of all, we have a free speech, general free speech policy in the WAC. And you do all have this presentation, so I think you can click on these and be able to see the full language. We have a policy, an executive policy regarding discrimination and harassment, and that indicates or expresses a commitment to protecting our community from discrimination. Then in our standards of conduct for students that we were discussing earlier today, that includes prohibitions related to Executive Policy 15 regarding the disruption or obstruction, physical harm, or direct threats, damage to property, violation of university policies. And then also our time, place, and manner restrictions. Those prohibit speech that disrupts or obstructs, and this is where a number of universities have gotten into some sticky trouble. Speech that disrupts or obstructs teaching, results in physical abuse, threatens bodily harm, endangers the health or safety of any person, results in malicious damage to property, refusal to comply with law enforcement, etc. And also intentionally inciting others to engage in prohibited activity. So that time, place, and manner restriction, which is in our WAC codes, is really important in terms of if there was going to be an event, how do we evaluate whether or not it can happen on the campus? Like, where's the line of crossing over? That's a fairly comprehensive statement of the opportunity or the criteria we would use. And then finally, facility use rules for First Amendment and free speech activities. That WAC code provides definitions of limited public forum areas that are available for First Amendment activities. It also provides a procedure to provide notice of the use of a limited public forum area, and it includes reference to the time, place, and manner restrictions. And then finally, I did want to mention that where there are known or anticipated freedom of speech events on the Pullman campus or events that have the potential to divide communities, we convene a new group called the Community Equity Response Team, excuse me, formerly known as the Community Response Team. And I began to put this group together with my team soon after becoming the Pullman chancellor, because I felt I needed a group as a sounding board to evaluate events that might happen on campus that had the potential to cross over into issues of freedom of speech or had potential to divide communities. And not just refer to the policies, but actually know who is going to be at the table, who do we need at the table. And so we took this community equity response team. It's comprised of representatives from the chancellor's office, but also student affairs, international programs, compliance and civil rights, the police, the campus police, provost's office, human resources, but it also includes a representative from WSU and as well as our graduate professional student association. So we have students as well as faculty and staff serving on it. And then we bring in subject matter experts depending on what the issue might be. So this group evaluates situations or pending situations where, as I say, might invoke freedom of speech events or have opportunities to divide the community. And they make recommendations to me that may range simply from a campus communication should go out to outreach to impacted groups to let them know something was going to happen, or providing contemplative spaces in cases where we feel that the community may need additional support. Certainly any activity or event where there are allegations of discrimination or violence or hate speech, they're referred to our compliance and civil rights office or the WSU Police Department, et cetera. So let's see. For any potentially divisive events that we have advance notice for, the CERT coordinates with Pullman social media to share alternative routes around campus. So, sometimes there are going to be large crowds and we need to get pedestrian traffic or vehicle traffic. Let's see, signage is also a place where events are happening on the wall to let pedestrians know about potential disruptions. And ultimately, our goal as an educational institution is to encourage and support dialogue and free speech and open communication. And of course, we always encourage a context of mutual respect. That's really our goal. So finally, given that this is an election year, CERT, I know, is already working on communications and guidelines for who, when, and how to respond to related local, national, or of course, always global incidents that are happening around. So again, this is just a quick summary to let you know what we've been putting together. I guess I would first turn to Lisa Guerrero on the screen, Haley and Jenna, if there is anything you would want to add, or Phil, if you wanted to say anything about the system-wide efforts. Add or correct, I should say. Lisa or Haley, anything? Okay.
No, I would just add that as Elizabeth stated, the search team is very cognizant of the responsibility that's held by institutions. Free speech is one of those areas that is really difficult to sort of parse out clearly to all of our communities about the difference between free speech, protected speech, and academic freedom. These are three vastly different things. They're connected, but they're very different. So as Elizabeth said, in preparation for the election, we do know that these issues will be coming forth. And so we are already preparing for various ways to be proactive, but also resources and ways where we will have to be reactive in certain respects. So I think that's all I would add.
Phil, did you want to?
Yeah, one thing I would add is, I guess I would say thank you to Chancellor Chilton for really kind of moving this forward at the Pullman level, and then making sure that we move it forward at the system level as well. This issue of free speech has been a very hot topic on college campuses long before the issues in Israel in October, but I think that just brought it really into sharp focus. So as the Chancellor mentioned, given the fact that we are in a presidential election year, we anticipate this will be a period of time where there'll be a lot of questioning about is this free speech? A lot of people use the term hate speech. That's not technically a legal term. I think sometimes students and members of the public think they understand what that means, and think that we can prevent what they interpret as hate speech from taking place. So there's work that needs to be done around education, as well as ensuring that everybody has an opportunity to safely state their points of view on issues.
Before I open it up to our other counselors, they would wish to say anything. Are there any questions about the CERT or the efforts surrounding communicating about free speech?
Have you tracked any metrics around incidents where you've had to advertise some of this policy? We track.
Oh, for the CRT, the tracking of.
Yeah, I'm
events
looking
and-
for data, and also just sort of like level of activity that has been versus what you might anticipate,
Yeah.
as you said on, with the election year.
Yeah, I am going to, of course, put Haley James on the spot to ask her a little bit about the CERT group, which has really just been reformed. It was loosely a system level group, but it consisted of mostly Pullman staff. And so we sort of pulled it in to focus on the Pullman campus, since the other campuses have similar types of groups that focus on that. What I will say, just since October 7th, and Jenna, please correct me if I'm wrong about this. We have seen an increase of reports of anti-Semitic behavior since October 7th on the Pullman campus. Each one of them is investigated per our policies. I asked the question, have we seen an increase in anti-Islamic or anti-Muslim behavior? The answer is no, in terms of what has been reported. However, anecdotally, those individuals are often less comfortable reporting. They're largely international students as well. And so we're not sure the reporting versus the incidence of perceived behavior is really there. Am I expressing that correctly, Jenny?
Indeed, yeah, I wouldn't add anything more, except to say, based on the openness and conversations that we're having with many different groups of students, we're learning and supporting and collaborating with everything from the meditative and prayer space that we have, for instance, on the Pullman campus, and getting feedback and expanding on some of those needs. We've also worked very closely with regard to 3 different student groups who did a march and a protest, and we sat down with students, and after that, we also have connected with each of them, just with them, and really been able to understand what are those barriers and concerns and issues just in general in terms of their student experience. And so from where one thing leads to another, as I will always say, our students are closest to the problems and they're closest to the solutions. And we're at the table navigating that together. The police also support the community policing model to help with the protests to be very successful and protective of those individuals to do that in a safe way, so that anything from outside or within the campus, that they're navigating that successfully. And it was very well done.
Yeah, I mean, the incident that Jenna's referring to, the Muslim student union, the Black student union, and the African diaspora, are they a union as well? Club.
RSO.
And allies marched across Terrell Mall and wanted to speak with me. And so I sat down with them in late November, early December. And really the website was partly spurred the urgency of doing that by them, who said it's unclear when we feel that we are unsafe, where do we go? What are the resources? How do we, what do we stand for as an educational institution? So it was really the sort of push to get something up there, and then we'll continue to improve it. But in terms of the other part of your question about the CERT, the CERT group, Haley, can you say a little bit about the frequency or the numbers, or Lisa, I know you're both actively involved in that, just the information about numbers of incidents, let's say in this past academic year?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on that. So, I would say, as Elizabeth mentioned, the CERT was sort of stood up in an informal capacity, and we've just recently formalized it. And one of our charges and recommendations, going back to Elizabeth, was that we start tracking a little bit more of that data. So there's a lot that's available through compliance and civil rights, but not necessarily through what we've seen historically. Typically over the course of the semester, what we've responded to is a lot of these actual free speech incidents on the mall. And typically, I would say actually they're external groups or individuals coming in to do demonstrations on the mall. And that's been it goes into that public forum space where we are a public institution, and so they are welcome on our campus. But making sure that we communicate to our students so that and faculty and staff so that they know there may be upsetting content out in public so that they can find safe spaces around so they don't have to engage with that. I would say over last semester, CERT probably responded to, before the Israel-Gaza increase in violence, we probably responded to 3 or 4 incidents. But what we're looking at now going into this election year is actually looking at the 2016 election, because 2020, as you all remember, was pandemic. So it was very different on campus. But in Pullman, the 2016 election, we had a lot of demonstrations. We had a student group who built a wall on the mall. And so planning for that, looking at what went well and what didn't go well, and how we could proactively respond and provide resources to all those different groups in advance of an election this year.
That was a question. Are you suggesting that or saying that some of the people that come for these things are off campus? Or are they out of town?
Yeah. So some of the,
Can you speak up?
I'm sorry?
Speak up.
Oh, you can. Some of, for example, a frequent tabler on the Terrell Mall is anti-abortion group. I don't know exactly where they hail from, somewhere in the area. They have posters that are quite graphic and could be disturbing to a number of people. So we usually just let through social media or through some signage, just letting people know if you walk, you're going to see this, and they can be here, and just letting people know, because we can't bar them from doing that, but just informing people. So that's an example of an external group.
I seem to remember that some point in the past, we actually put in new guidelines for people from off campus who want to come in and do a protest. I think that was primarily for those that didn't have an on-campus group that was sponsoring them. And it seemed to me it came into, I can't remember all the details, but I do remember reading and going through that. So I don't know.
Not in recent, Jenna's saying no, not in recent memory anyway.
But it's probably may have been, not have been when you were here, but I do remember going through that. But anyway, it was a matter of what groups were required to do if they wanted to have an on-campus major protests, if they were not sponsored.
Yeah.
And was there issue? I feel like there was issues around if we had to have additional security.
Well, yeah, but it was guidelines that things that they had to
Yeah, I remember
apply.
that too.
There were specific things, so you might want to take a look at that.
Jenna, do you want to comment on this? Because your group looks at the community response team and still.
If you do, can you go front so that everybody can see you? Sorry. Just with John on the video.
You do like, but you know, it's fine.
I know. Haley, and I don't know if you have any more details as well. I think that maybe what we're talking about is in relation to sometimes a registered student organization would invite a group in, and then because of that invitation, they have some privilege to certain spaces to speak or to have room space or things like that. Whereas some of what we're talking about too is because we're a state entity and the property is open, their time, place, and manner, then this comes into place in terms of the space by which they can come in and be a part of it. So that's also a third part where I would say if the registered student organization and this entity, that's where there are some guidelines where the de-escalation and strategies with regard to keeping whatever they're wanting to message, helping them be safe and understand that process, and where the support, for instance, from our WSU police, Don Daniels, who's our assistant chief of police, is tremendous in this space because she really talks with them preventative ways beforehand to help them accomplish what they're trying to do. And so, because that matters with regard to the guidelines, I think that's what you're getting at is what are those guidelines?
Right. Well, it's just I just remember, the board had to pass on certain guidelines So, but what I am remembering now that you're saying something is that, it really had to do with building access as well. Because, and I think they were, groups coming onto campus that were not associated with, registered.
We
Groups.
found that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Twenty sixteen.
Oh.
Updated on use of facilities. And so this is Black 504-33, so thank you very much, Nathan. So
Lori, you're probably the only person in the room that was there when that was done, because I don't,
You were, you were the two only Regents here though. I wouldn't have been a Regent then.
No.
I don't remember that.
It may have been faculty
it's
senate.
included in the
Faculty
list.
senate would look at this
In my
first.
PowerPoint, it's included in that list. So if you click on it, it'll take you to but that was updated in May of 2016.
Yeah. Okay.
External groups who want to.
That did predate you.
Physical
Yeah.
spaces, not Terrell Mall, which is.
No, but it was just sort of, I knew that there were restrictions and requirements for groups that weren't registered groups at the
That was right around
university.
the time of Milo. You know, the guy Milo that was.
Oh,
doing-
yeah.
and-
Mel wants,
Yeah.
Mel's gonna
And
come.
he got snowed out at Pullman and then there was a shooting on the UW.
Yes.
We're not gonna all be able to fit it
Yeah.
in.
Well, I think the phone a friend, Nathan has worked.
No, and Danielle will remember this as well. We had a lot of pressure from our students to redefine public spaces and free speech zones on our campuses. And that was one of their top legislative priorities for the DOLAs in 2016. And so what we ended up doing, with a lot of credit to Danielle, actually, is taking that out of the legislature and developing new policy that was approved in 2016 on use of campus facilities. Little history lesson.
Thank you. Thank you.
The only thing similar I remember, prior presidential election, discussion about building a wall was popular and someone wanted to build a ceremonial wall. It did.
That was my group did get it.
Yeah, we did do
And there
that.
was a counter demonstration, we just, but
That
then
was
there was
peaceful. It
a,
worked out because you guys
but then there
worked
was
that one well with
a national
Kansas Police and everything.
speaker connected to the campus group.
We had this student.
And they stopped at Seattle first, and at their event, there were gunshots, so they never had the event. So we dodged that.
We dodged it because there was a blizzard. They were
Yeah.
gonna come to us first. And then there was a blizzard, they couldn't get to Pullman and they. It was also the Student Republican Party leader and we had social media threats that they were gonna storm every class he was going to. I mean, we went through some stuff around that time, but that was some of where we needed to clarify what were free speech zones, and going into someone's classroom and disrupting it was very clearly not violating free speech by saying you can't do that. Yeah.
Yes. Regent Shetler, since you're not in the room and we have lots of folks interacting with us, I'm just gonna help nudge a little bit that the point of the presentation was really to continue to embrace freedom of speech, and in particular, the work that's being done on the Pullman campus, but I know is happening system-wide, and so I really appreciate this presentation. Regent Shetler, are there other items on the agenda that you want to be able to take control of the meeting at this point?
No, yes, we do have an action item to discuss, which we can do next, but I want to thank everyone for their participation in this excellent report, and of course, this robust discussion. These can be hotly debated topics, and I think it's important that we all weigh in. So thank you very much. And we will move on to our last item, which is a discussion item. And I would like to have our WSU Global Campus Chancellor, David Saleh, present to us the Global Campus Strategic Plan.
Yeah, it's an action.
Okay. So for you have the Global Campus Strategic Plan. You reviewed that plan and we had a discussion in our January meeting. We received no edits, alterations, changes, and so that's the plan in front of you today for approval.
Comments or questions for David?
So I would just say that I appreciate that we spent a little bit of time at the last meeting, having it in front of me again. Hearing Regent Ramos again mention how significant and important our global campus is, particularly as we think about the rankings of the global campus. I would encourage you to continue to be bold. This feels like an area of growth and opportunity. It speaks to a lot of accessibility to be able to serve the state of Washington. And so I think the strategic plan is great. I'd like to see even more bold thinking relative to what we can achieve with the global campus as an asset to WSU.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And maybe just a comment, I mean, as we're out and about, we're sort of studying all of the national trends and keeping our radars active for just what's going on in the academic sector. The demand for virtual and global learning continues to rise, and some of our peer institutions are exploring acquisition. So, you know, numbers, it's kind of like M&A, right? And instead of growing organically, they're going to grow by acquisition. And it's just interesting. And I would just encourage all of us to continue to keep an eye on what's going on across the academic sector. We have a head start, which is awesome. And I just want to continue to thank you.
Thank you very much. Some of those acquisitions aren't going very well.
No. Yes.
As we're reading.
We can sell David.
Syndicate. I appreciate your strategic plan and just the 4 succinct goals. That helps from a messaging standpoint and just being able to stay engaged and not, it's really concise. So thank you.
Thank you.
Well, with no more comments or questions, I'd like to move us along. So this concludes the agenda items for the Strategic and Operational Excellence Committee, and I'd now like to turn the meeting back over to Chair Schauer.
Excellent. So there is a written report, in case you didn't see it on the strategic plan progress. Given our role in governance and strategic planning, this is always an important aspect of the work that Regent Shetler's leading with Chris Hoyt's team. And so just want to continue to, even though there wasn't a presentation, make sure that folks are able to review and access the ways in which we're measuring success and in particular, the progress towards our strategic priorities. So thank you, Regent Shetler. All right, this is the moment of the meeting where we move into finance, and it becomes a multiple-hour meeting and focused on our finance, which is really important. And in order for us to feel ready and refreshed, for me to transition over to Regent Ramos, we have decided to take a bit of a break. So let's go ahead and maybe take a 10-minute break so that we can start straight up at 2:30, focused on finance. And just ask that everybody just pay attention to the clock so that when we start, we're ready to go. Thank you.
We're Kylie
All right, well, the Regents will now convene. That was my forceful use of the gavel today.
For sure.
We are live and we are now convening the Finance and Administration Committee chaired by Regent Ramos.
Hey, thank you, Chair Shower. Welcome, everyone, to the Board of Regents Finance and Administration Committee meeting. We have 16 items we're going to cover today. So we're never short on items. And a lot of team effort behind the scenes just to prepare the quality information and data that comes before you today. And with that has been the engagement of Regent Cerna, Regent McDonald, Regent Shetler. So I just want to thank the co-regents in the preparation for today's. Our first information item is the athletic budget update, and we have our CFO, Executive Vice President of Finance and Administration, Leslie Brunelli. I think there's Pat online, our Athletics Director, Pat Chun, and our Assistant Vice President for Business and Financial Services, John Farmer.
And Athletics CFO as well.
Yes.
We're gonna actually have Kurt start us off, please.
Yep. I can see the slot machines in the background behind your hat, so. Anyway.
I'm back in Pullman.
Just as we get started with the athletics budget update and a little bit of where we're going, and it's tied into where we are with the Pac-12 conference right now. And as Nathan shared with us earlier today, we are in the final stages of trying to get everything signed on that agreement. So there's a lot of fluidity right now into revenues, what we're going to be getting from the conference, those types of things moving forward. So everybody gets frustrated a little bit going, well, how come there's not more concrete things here? What we don't want to do is be out in a public setting saying, here's all the stuff that's going to happen before we have all 12 signatures on that particular document. It's really critical we do that. So it's a crappy timing of when the board meeting was. I thought, probably like a lot of people did a month ago, we would have all this signed and be able to have a lot more concrete information. So we know a lot more today. I appreciate the work everybody's doing, but please know that once that agreement signed, we think we're going to have a lot better picture of how we can build our revenue package for this fiscal year, what next fiscal year will look like. Is that fair enough?
Thank you. And before we'll have John dive into the numbers, Pat, is there anything that you'd like to say to frame this?
A couple of things. One, as always, just there's been a lot of work that continues to be put on not only this year's budget, but we're doing in the future, and that's all of our head coaches, our entire team, John. I mean, what we're trying to do with our budget is really unprecedented in college athletics. And two, just selfishly, I wish this meeting was in Pullman today. I flew back from Vegas, just got here a couple minutes ago, but today's just one of the reminders of the value of athletics on a college campus, at least the way we perceive it. There should be maybe 10,000 people in our basketball venue tonight. It'll be on Fox Sports 1. We're still in contention to win the Pac-12 championship. And, the text messages I've been getting all day from donors in and around all over the state that are coming in for this game specifically. And we're expecting a record number of students to show up tonight. And it'll just be one of those magical nights in Pullman, provided we can win. So just a reminder is the energy that's coming from Pullman is just one of the special things about athletics. But like I said, I'm appreciative of all the hard work and the patience as we work through our budget. And I'll give it back to Leslie and John at this point.
Thank you, Pat. And I'm going to turn it right over to John.
Thank you, Pat, Leslie, thank you, President Schultz, for the opening there.
I have to speak up.
Yes, sir. So since our last discussion, or the last time you saw the materials in January, we don't have a tangible update on the revenue side to share. We're still projecting a $4.4 million revenue loss, as we mentioned the last time we got together. But a couple things I will point out on that. One, there's always a bit of a timing issue between when we turn these materials in and how quickly things change in our budget, particularly our ticket sales. They didn't make it into these materials, but because of the tear that our men's basketball team has been on the last couple of weeks. We've had two really critical home games thus far, one extraordinarily critical home game this evening. And because of that, we've seen an uptick in ticket sales that didn't make it in these materials. They'll be on a future one. So some positive increases there. A couple other things related to revenue I want to point out that I've mentioned in the previous discussion. Our annual fund is our donations that are directly tied to sporting scholarships each year. Those are tied to our season ticket renewals with football, which are live now, went live a few weeks ago. And we really don't see the lion's share of those funds until mid-March through the end of May. So no tangible update now. Those have been slow as we expected with the change of scheduling going forward, but we're starting to see an uptick there. Nothing to report tangibly on our variance there, but just something to keep in mind for the futures as we continue to close out the fiscal year. And then the final one, just to point out, I know that we're all aware of this, but just to some potential fluctuation in our revenue distribution from the Pac-12. Again, nothing to point out tangibly here, but just as we continue to close out what this year looks like, transitioned into our new future with them and what that operation looks like, could be some variances there to the revenue we received this year, but more to come on that. So again, all of that to say, no change for this update. But we will move into expenses quickly. Our compensation, no change since January. We are still projecting a small overage there related to student wages and overtime that we saw in the fall. We have seen that come back down over the last couple of pay periods, but and there's still an opportunity for that to recover, but still forecasting overage as of now. Our financial aid line, this has been where we've seen our biggest surplus in the budget to date. This time last year, we're tracking $500,000 better than we were at this time last year. So some positive news there, some money to get back to the bottom line, and still an opportunity for that to grow as well. Fourth, programs. This is always one of our biggest variance line items. It's our team travel, recruiting, game expenses, medical, and team meals. We have seen some overages there and some cost increase related to team travel, recruiting, and medical expenses. That's on top of the one I noted in the last discussion related to medical expenses. Something to bear in mind as we move forward. It is awesome that we continue to win and we want to go as deep into the postseason as possibly can, which we did with volleyball. Both men's and women's basketball will compete in postseason in some form. There is a cost to that. And the further we go, the more expensive that it is. So just, I frame that just to bear in mind as we go forward. There could be some cost increases there related to those items. Our next item, direct admin and dues, no change since the last one, since our last update. Still projecting overage there related to the cost that we had to pay out this year for our future conference affiliations. And then our last expense category, our other expenses. You may recall in a previous discussion, we've been reporting a fairly sizable positive variance there, surplus there, because of the removal of the anticipated bowl expenses. However, we do have some cost creep in our facility maintenance costs, custodial costs, and then our game guarantees, which have gone up just slightly further than we had anticipated. So that surplus that we had projected in the previous round has gone down. So in summary, trying to be brief here to keep us on track. You'll recall, beginning of the fiscal year, the board approved a $4 million budget deficit. This was the result of our charter Comcast dish issue at the Pac-12 and their distributions as affiliates. We have seen an increase in our overage there and our anticipated deficit, which we'll have more to report on at the next meeting. I will say though, as we've seen that increase, the university is in active conversations on what we can do to offset that and backstop that to not further increase our internal deficit. So we'll have more to come at a future discussion about that as well. So that's FY24. Questions?
Any
So
questions?
there's some cost to success of going deep into the tournament. But it's probably all right with the board if you take us along.
Okay, so I appreciate the comments. I guess just to emphasize, we still have our process of an athletic oversight committee that meets in between meetings. So, we're trying to keep close tabs on all things athletics, and you're getting the outcome of that committee meeting right here. One thing I learned as I've been paying attention to the NCAA CEO more and more, he noted that there are about 60 schools in the sort of Power 5 structure but 1,000 schools across the nation that are NCAA. And when you look at a normalized version of our expenditures, it's another example of punching above our weight. And John's much more articulate with how he describes that, but there is a lot of effort, and I just can't let the information session go by without thanking the entire athletic department for all the work that they're doing and the support that you're giving them, John.
I noticed that as I was reading about Paul Feinbaum, that there was also, and your buddy, that there was also a story about football coaches taking pay cut. Can you talk about that a little bit? I hadn't heard that. That's right.
Yeah, as we've worked to put together the budget for next year, our philosophy on that has been the same. At the end of each season, Pat, John, and that team sits down and talks about what their budget's going to look like for next year when we know we're going to have reduced revenues. And we did exercise the ability to reduce some of our football coaching salaries as part of that. And every sport's a little different, every contract's a little bit different, but we're going to be prepared at the next meeting to be able to say, here's what our budget target is for next year, and here's how we're going to reach it. And that will require continued diligence and some cuts.
And with success, you have a more attractive coach than ever regard to. So in the paper, it says there's negotiations or at least discussions around coach.
Yeah.
Yes.
So Pat does a great job of communicating with all of our coaches. And, you know, a lot of times people think you have no conversation with a coach until they're winning and, you know, they're on the market. Pat has consistent conversations with our men's and women's basketball coaches about WSU. He's been out visiting with donors and has some additional dollars collected to invest in basketball. And, you know, we're going to do everything we can to continue to say, you've been successful here. We'd love you to be successful here. But as Pat and his team hire really successful people, they're going to be a target for an awful lot of places that have significant resources. So it's a balancing act. We're going to do everything we can. But at the same time, we recognize that some folks are going to be offered maybe dollar figures that you would be insane not to say yes to. We think we've got a really good opportunity for our coaches to remain at WSU, but we also, you know, are in a fiscally constrained environment, and we've got to also keep that in mind. Pat, what would you add to that?
No, I mean, it's the challenge of our environment is there's a premium on successful coaches. I think there's a long history of coaches that have been successful at Pullman, I think end up in the College Basketball Hall of Fame, especially on the men's basketball side. So the budget is what it is. Obviously, there are multiple reasons why a coach may leave or may stay, but you know, we will continue to work toward keeping, you know, having the best coaches for our student athletes, and whatever road that takes us down, we'll go down that path.
Leslie, could you share, I think you already know this number, and I hope I'm not asking for a number that you may not have off the top of your mind. What is the percentage of the athletics budget out of our overall WSU budget?
I won't do, someone can do the math for me, but the athletics budget is $83 million this year in round numbers, and our total budget is 1.2 billion.
I think it's important that we stay focused on that too, that despite the amount of time that we spend discussing the athletics budget in each of these meetings and the oversight that's being done, the level of transparency and particularly at this level, the commitment to athletics, I think is important to know. Thank you.
Go Cougs.
Yeah. If I could, before we leave this part, I hope everybody enjoys the March Madness experience and WSU being in that. You know, if we look at other institutions, I know we'll be talking to our admission staff that when we're playing in this is a time to remind people, hey, you kind of love this, the 10,000 people in Beasley tonight, you know, we need to utilize this really great point in time over the next week or two when we're going to be the talk of the nation and just reminding people we got great academic programs. We got a great Greek system. And by the way, you can watch some exciting Cougar basketball and football and as part of our culture. So we want to utilize that, especially since other Division I schools in the state are not having the same level of success. And I think it's a neat opportunity for us. So let's enjoy it. Let's enjoy the ride.
Okay, do we not have, isn't our ex-basketball coach Calvin Sampson, does he not have one of the top teams in the country right now?
I think Houston's
Number
number
one?
one, aren't they?
I think they're number one.
Yeah. Well, let's just,
Calvin was here too.
let's see us win tonight. I could say
Okay.
some ruder things.
Great work. We'll watch the game later. Okay, and thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you. And a real-time update, we're down to standing room only tickets for tonight. So this should be a pretty wonderful experience inside Beasley.
Wow.
Cougar.
And we're here.
Nice
And you have
scheduling.
15 more items on my list to go through. Hang on. All right, so now joining Leslie to present our second information item is Assistant Vice President for Business and Planning, Chris Jones. And we're gonna talk about information on fiscal year 2025 budget development.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get acclimated to the clicker here. Thank you, Regent Ramos. And I wanted to, before we started this, thank the committee also for the robust prep call that we had. You know, your questions and comments help us think about how we're going to present these materials. So I really appreciate your time. But I also want to call out Regent Ramos particularly because she's been exceptionally generous with her time with me over the last several months, frankly. And has spent a lot of time that you don't see doing a lot of analysis on her own. And so I really wanted to make you aware that she is doing that additional work here. All right, so we wanted to talk to you about fiscal 25, and I should probably say this may be the first time you've seen Chris Jones not on the screen. So this is Chris, he is real. I'll have twist over to him in a moment. But I did want to call it too that Regent Ramos wanted to be clear that we were very thankful for the work that we have done so far and where we are. And you mentioned to me just a few moments ago, the highlight of the financial statement and how important getting that done. I can't tell you how really critical that is to where we are today. This time last year, we still didn't have the prior year's financial statement, so we were still working on that. And so we've had this benefit of a couple of months now to be thinking more strategically about what information do we need and how are we going to get that in line for our budget planning. So I really can't emphasize how important it was to get that done. And Matt and his group did a marvelous job getting that done in time and frankly, getting the recommendations or the findings resolved. So I want to point that out. We have on here too that the modernization, the Workday project is working. Matt's going to talk about that in just a moment because we're up for the contract renewal for the change there and want to speak to that briefly. Also want to put the budget in context. You know, we've now talked about the budget, I think, in every Regent meeting that I've been a part of. And I think prior to that, it came up here and there. Certainly the athletics budget came up, but we've not talked about the big university, $1.2 billion as much previously. And I think that's really the critical thing here is that the transparency of this is essential. Mike Walcott said in his discussion about research, if you don't connect the dots and provide the information, people will fill in that gap for you. And so our effort is really to talk about the budget more often in a very strategic way, but also make the information available. And that's really what we're working towards is as we get through this round of budget hearings you'll hear about is produce a document. Here it is. This is what we are doing next year. So we presented at the last meeting in Seattle a discussion to finish the financial statement, but also the early information about the budget. And I said at the time that it's kind of a mixed bag. And that's really what I wanted to highlight today is that there are some mixed messages and it depends on what seat you're sitting in, what you're looking at. So if you're external to the university, if you're our rating agency or one of our banks and you pick up our financial statement, it looks very good. Unquestionably, we are in a better financial position than we were in 19, certainly from 17, 18, when the cash position had fallen very low. Our debt rating is stable. We've had it reaffirmed both by Moody's and S&P. It's clear that the higher education emergency relief funds from federal government helped us, both our students and our auxiliary enterprises that could not operate during that period of COVID. And again, the audit, getting it done in time and getting it clean is really, really important. So externally, great, pick up our financial statement. And that is the only public information we have on our budget. That's it. If you're inside the house though, and you're one of our units, this is how you feel. My budget has gone down, and it has since COVID occurred. Pay feels like it is stagnant. MSIs have been pretty limited, fair to say. Costs are going up everywhere, and we've been in this persistent enrollment decline. So you can see these are just very different things to talk about. And then go a step further, and let's get into my life, Chris's life, Matt's life, where we are in finance. We can see that there are structural budget deficits. They're evident to us now. So we're getting just enough reporting that it's pretty clear that this time of year compared to this time last year, we have expended more dollars with less dollars coming in. So what does that tell you? We're spending down our reserves. If we're doing that in a thoughtful way, and we're doing that to seed future revenue growth, or think about how we're going to position something for the next iteration of the budget cycle, that's great. If we're doing it to kick the can because we didn't make the budget cut, that's where we're going to get caught short. And so right now we're trying to figure out, where are we? Are we in the middle of that? We've sat down with some of our units that we can see that there are deficits appearing, to have more conversation to see, what are you doing? Where are you planning? What we can see too is this pockets of wealth. And I've used that in quotes because there are positives and there are negatives. And so if I pull all of the units and look at them, I'm only getting a piece of the info, because I may see positive numbers in a lot of these. There are some that have negatives. Athletics does. There are a couple of others. But if we break that apart the next step farther, do we know that our unrestricted funds are positive? Or is it our restricted funds that are positive and masking that there might be a deficit over in an unrestricted fund? So we have to get down to that next level and then keep going down all the way to the very discrete unit level. We do have some units that have built up a sizable amount of fund balances and reserves. That's great, because that's our working capital. It's what we're operating on every day. But I will tell you, at the end of the day, accumulating wealth in units doesn't mean that their use of it will be strategic. So it still has to tie back into the strategic plan. I came from a previous institution that once had accumulated a very large amount of carry forward, and their intent was to build a building. In the terms of academic priorities, it was probably at the bottom, and it was not the best use of those resources. So it doesn't make sense to say, yes, you accumulated, go do what you want. We have to still monitor that. We also need to be monitoring our carry forward, these fund balances, because again, that is our working capital, and ours is very erratic throughout the year. Again, it goes up as the students pay their bills, it comes down the rest of the time, goes back up when the students pay their bills. So we have to put more monitoring around that. We've talked about reporting before. We're working hard to get new reporting. We've made a very large breakthrough in the last week or so. We can see a report. We're at the very highest level, what we're spending this year compared to the prior year, compared to budget. So that just has to get deeper and deeper and be more robust. And again, because the financial statement is done, we have the luxury of doing that right now. We are very decentralized. You know that. We've talked about this before. We want decisions to be made the closest they are to the academic unit, to the student, but then we have to be able to hold folks accountable when they do things. We don't have a culture of that at the university. We don't have a culture of saying, you have overspent, fix this. And we're going to have to get to that point of being able to do that. And then finally, this last one, that there's no obvious link between financial sustainability and strategic planning. Again, we need a document that shows that very explicitly says, these are the goals, this is how we financed it. Because otherwise, we're going to create a strategic plan that we cannot move forward because it doesn't have the dollars behind it to move it.
Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Did you say that we do have a financial sustainability plan that links with our strategic
No,
plan?
no, no. I said we do not.
Okay, I just wanted to.
We don't explicitly link that. That's why a budget document would be helpful, because that way you'll show this is what we're planning to do, and here's how we get there in terms of dollars. If those things aren't linked together, we'll create a plan that you'll never be successful in. And the other thing I would say, and I haven't put it on there, I really should, and I know Charles Camersdale is probably listening to this on YouTube, we have to bring risk into this too. So the fact that we have an enterprise risk management, we know where the challenges are. We have to consider that when we're going through the budget development process as well. So now where are we? That there's a lot of opportunity here. We do have to consider strategic budget reductions for next year, and hopefully they're minimal. And we do have some dollars coming from the state. I'll show you that financially in just a moment. But it's not enough to cover what we need for the graduate students. We do need to manage the use of fund balances. We noticed all of our units back in November. If you plan to use your dollars, you need to ask for permission. We need to understand it. And what we've been looking for is the use recurring? Is the use I'm paying salaries with it? Is the use I'm doing something I always do with it? That's the scary part. If you're using it for clearly one-time things, good. Or even if you are using it to do recurring things in a one-time way, what's the next step? What are you doing in the next year when the dollar is no longer available? We need to support compliance with our policy. We have a very good executive policy budget responsibility. It's the one that tells everyone, if you run an account into a deficit, you need to fix it and tell us how you're going to do it. That's what we're not following back up with. Chris's office, Chris has been in the budget office for 10 years now, and there's just not, it's not a monitoring place. It's frankly not staffed to be a place that monitors units. We are decentralized. We have finance officers across the institution, and it's our expectation that they are monitoring and taking care of that, but that's just not been where we are. And preparing for the administrative and academic program review, and that was the president for just a moment.
Yeah, thanks, Leslie. As we run through a lot of what we want to do, as the leadership talk, one of the things that we think we want to launch for next academic year is doing a comprehensive review of administrative structure, costs, things like that. Talked about wanting to do that for some period of time, linking that also with an academic program review. Sandra's not here, but the Tri-Cities campus, and we've got some of their leaders here, spent the last year and a half doing this. We've last done this coming out of the Great Recession at WSU, so it's been a long, long time. And, you know, the problem is you say this and people look and they go, West Virginia, and they pick these places nationally. What I want us to do is spend quite a bit of time putting together process and how we want to go about doing this, working with our faculty leadership, working with our staff leadership, so that when you actually get into doing the review, you've already gone through who's involved, what are the goals, what are the objectives, how you're going to do that, and that you don't sort of go through it, come up with a set of recommendations that will be controversial. And everybody goes, well, you didn't exercise shared governance, faculty didn't have a voice, students didn't have a voice. So the design of what we're going to do is going to be as important as actually execution. But so we'll talk more about this. And I don't want anybody thinking there's some baked cake here. There's not, but we know we need to spend the next couple of months starting the discussions internally over the next year. And so we'll want to get the board more engaged with this too, and not engaged at the end, but engaged with the process and what we hope to do, because that's also really important. So stay tuned. There'll be more, but this is going to be a longer term process, and it's one that we just need to spend some time on with the goal of being able to reinvest in areas that have been pointed out recently as important: faculty positions, certain programs, research, scholarly work, those types of things as well. So it's not just, are we going to trim? It's where we're going to reinvest as well, and that's going to be really important.
And the last thing I'll say is this is really all done to set the stage for the next strategic plan. So it is, we know where we are potentially, where is the floor there, and how can we build from there. Budget development challenges, I'll just call your attention to 25. So we did ask our units to be ready to talk to us about 1%, 3%, and 5% reductions. This budget hearings start after spring break. There's no intent for that to be across the board. They have been previously across the board. So now we're looking at, tell us what it does. What is the impact of the reduction at the unit level?
That'll be interesting again, to go that next layer, because I think I appreciate your principles that you put up there with the accountability pieces. That there is an element of change management here culturally at Washington State University around hiding what you might have, hiding your stash versus wanting to share it for the betterment of lifting the whole boat. They're going to lift perhaps their own boat. I mean, that's human nature, I understand, but because you couldn't see other people's budgets for prior to our workday, I think there's some interesting things probably as you peel this onion back, that will create some interesting behavior around protection of dollars and turf and versus some who perhaps have repeatedly taken the hit over and over, but perhaps might be producing more than what we realize they are from a student engagement level, a student enrollment level. It'll be helpful, I think, for as a regent to understand what those dynamics look like too, and hold everybody accountable to raise this whole boat. I think we talk in principle that we want to raise the whole boat, but when you start talking about people's money and department money, you know, you're going to be protective of that, and that concept just kind of goes right out the window.
I'm sorry, can you just go back one slide really quick? I wholly agree, Marty. I also think, but I just want to make sure that this is so important, and the way in which you've structured the presentation, I want to make sure that I'm both listening and tracking the slides. What did I just hear you say, that the budget hearings that are 1%, 3%, and 5%, that the anticipation is not to do what we've done previously, where everyone takes and absorbs the same amount? Is the assumption everyone will take some sort of budget cut?
I think that I wouldn't say yes to that yet. I think we have to get through the hearings. You know that last year for 24, everyone took a 6% except enrollment management, because we knew that we needed to support enrollment management to bring more students in. I think having the hearing and understanding from the person who's the closest to it where the impact is will give us a better opportunity to know what is it that you're doing that helps, as you said, the whole boat. So I think it's too early to say that right now. Great. But I totally expect there not only to be some units that may not get reduced, there may be some where we put additional dollars, because this round of budget hearings, we are going to ask, where do you need dollars and what does that new dollar do? We haven't done that since the budget hearings have been sunset.
Yeah, can you put in money somewhere that you can double your investment, right?
Right.
Well, and that's really deeply saying yes to something, but at the same time, we have to say no to something else, and I've struggled with that. Last comment on this slide, could you mention that asterisk about WSU Tri-Cities and WSU Vancouver? I just want to make sure that we're not, I need to make sure that we all understand what that.
The best way I can describe it, Chris actually does a presentation of understanding the university budget. They are sort of an RCM, a responsibly centered management hybrid. So Tri-Cities in Vancouver are obviously part of the system and have a system portion of their budget, but they also live and die on their own enrollment. So in this past year, while the pooled campus, which is everyone but them, took a 6% reduction, Tri-Cities in Vancouver had a 1% reduction, but have to also manage to their own enrollment fluctuation. In Tri-Cities, it actually went up. In Vancouver, it went down a little bit. So they're managing the system piece and their own campus enrollment, a little bit different from the pool, which is the Pullman, Spokane, Everett, Global.
Are they having to contribute to the overall system as well? Yeah. In addition to being responsible to manage to the tuition reduction?
And that's that expectation that we are providing the core services to everybody. There's one payroll, there's one general ledger, there's one, all of those system functions. And not just financial functions, for sure.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Clarity.
Sure. All right, let's look at this slide. And these numbers are in flux and will continue to change. The top part of that is just to frame it. This is the pooled campuses. So this is not Vancouver and Tri-Cities and that number at the top. We have already approved a 3% tuition increase. We expect that will generate approximately $6 million. However, we know we are still coming down from where the enrollments were high, particularly at the Pullman campus. So that's a loss there. We are also incenting more via waivers, particularly for non-resident students to come in. So overall, our tuition increase is not nearly what the 3% will yield. If we had not made a decision to do some additional waivers, the loss of enrollment would be bigger. So we're trying to figure out how to piece this together. We meet frequently with SAICHI and with the institutional research team. Stephanie Kane runs this model for us. This, I believe, is based only on the fall term, and we still have to get the spring term in there. I'm hopeful we'll see that number inch itself up. Don't know that yet, but hopefully that will happen. How close are we to having that? I think it's just a week or so.
Yes,
away.
yeah.
Okay. So we'll hope to see that. So there's the tuition piece. Down below, you see the state funding, and Linda was here just a moment ago and mentioned this. This is not the right number anymore. The numbers are 500,000 for the current year for fiscal 24, because remember the grad student contract became effective on February 1, it's effective May 1. For next year, we have $2 million. We actually have less than that number. We also have $2 million in one-time money for the grad student contract, so we have to put it back on our request for the next biennium. Fine. But 2 million will make a difference. You know, it wasn't in the Senate budget, it wasn't in the governor's budget, so I need to reduce that by that 352,000. The need for next year for the core funds is 4.33 million. So 2 million makes a dent in it, but we still have to cover that other 2.33 million. The overall need for the graduate student contract is 7.2 million. That difference between 7.2 and 4.3 is what the grants and the other funds will cover. So just to frame it there. Then I have a line there that the pink, that's the reallocation. That's where the 1%, 3%, and 5% will come in. What do we need to make the budget balance? And we don't know that yet. If you go down below the bar, that's the expense side. So there are some new commitments that we are already on the hook to produce, and that of that large 5.3 number, 4.33 is the grad student contract. That's the first hit there. We also have a new provost coming. That's in there. We have a Connors endowed chair where we have an agreement to cover a portion of that in there. Those are the known commitments. Then you'll see the balance available is a negative number already. It's even more negative when I take out that 300,000 from above. So we're already starting from a place of have to find some way to make this balance. But we also have to acknowledge there's other needs on the campus. That identified needs is just an accumulation truly of when we receive stuff from units, the president does too, of put it on the list. So there's this list that we keep that totals this 5 million. Some things that are in there though, you will know, there's about 2 million that is to support the BBK effort to do the additional marketing. That's 2 million of that 5. There is the faculty equity that we have not done since fiscal 22. That's an assessment of faculty salaries based on equity. There's the cluster hire program for faculty that's been funded through this current year, that's not funded next year. It's in that number. But then there's other things that we will continue to add there. We're also leaving ourselves space to know utilities will go up. It just will. We need to look at our tort property and casualty insurance for the institution. There's likely some changes there. We finally have our hands back on the ability to get cyber insurance. We have not had cyber insurance, so we're going to try to get that back. There are some other things that need to go in there. Our IT software and licensing, you're going to hear in just a minute, Max is going to talk to you about Workday. This is the year Workday goes up. This is also the year that Microsoft, Adobe, and Zoom go up. So those are critical to our business. And then we have a line at the bottom for unit requests. We don't know what those are yet. That's where units need to come in and tell us, what do you need? And it's not the Christmas list. Please tell me of all your hopes and dreams. It's really, what do you need to function? What can you do to help us? And so we'll accumulate this. I have no doubt that this list will be many, many millions of dollars. And that's where we have to do the work of deciding how are we going to get this budget into balance. These guiding principles, and I won't go through them, came from the Executive Budget Committee. Elizabeth, Kirk, Daryl, and I have been sharing back and forth to refine them a little bit to speak to where we are today. These will look probably pretty familiar to you. I think we've used them in other settings, but this is what we're trying to keep in mind as we sit through this round of budget hearings. Then we'll go to the timeline. So we've been doing a lot of preliminary discussion with the campus and with deans. We saw the deans earlier in February, talked to chancellors. We got the state funding yesterday. Chris, Matt, Skinner, Angie Dobbins, and I have met with every AFO either individually or in small groups, just to say, where are you? What's going on? This is what the process is going to look like. How can we help? Chris's office has also done some open office hours to say, it's been a while since we've done budget hearings. Let us help you. And then Chris is going to talk to you about what's in the template that we're asking for and the rest of the process.
Sure, yeah. So the templates were released on February 23rd. They're an Excel workbook. That went out to about 30 units. So every college, every campus, our larger administrative areas. For each of those templates, we provide, information for context to help, leadership make decisions. So what's the financial performance for that college or campus for the past few years? How are they looking at December year to date? Their expenses versus their budget and their revenues. Also, if it's a college or a campus, showing, what are the credit hours generated in the fall compared to last fall and last academic year. Showing trends for staffing FTEs. What did the faculty FTE look like for the last 3 years? What about the civil service employee FTE? Just showing those trends and providing that additional context, which is unique to every unit. So we're also asking for a lot of information for units. First, we want to know, what do they expect at FY24 year end? Where do we expect to be as far as our balance? So for each unit, they need to project out their year end expenditures and estimate their year end budget revenues. So they're going to end with a deficit or a surplus. And that's going to be really important information for us to compile, so we get a good estimate of where we'll end year end. Are we going to be spending any of our fund balances, for example? We have a feeling we will be, because we have a carry forward use policy in effect this fiscal year, as we did last year. Leslie and Provost Chilton have received quite a few requests to spend carry forward this year. So that's one piece of information that's really important for us to analyze this year and set expectations. Also important would be the reduction tab itself, asking for those 1%, 3%, and 5% reduction scenarios. For those scenarios, each unit needs to meet their target, which is based off of their base budget level, or what we call PBL. That's the pooled state and tuition funding. That's a base budget for almost every unit across the university. They need to describe what they would do to accomplish that cut. We'll also ask, would this eliminate paid FTE? Would someone lose their job over this cut? And we also ask, what's the effect of cutting that? What's the effect on students' success, strategic priorities, diversity, equity, and inclusion? And then on another tab, we do ask for critical funding needs. We did try to provide some guidance so we don't get that Christmas list that was mentioned. So, focusing on things that would maybe need to be funded to meet legal or accreditation requirements. It needs to be tied to strategic priorities. Does it promote student success? Does it promote diversity, equity, and inclusion? Would it generate new revenues, maybe by increasing enrollments? So that's going to be a request as well. And all of these reduction scenarios and critical funding needs will be reviewed by leadership, who will ultimately make the decision sometime in April on which units take what amount of cut, and which of those critical funding needs will be funded.
So our hearings are scheduled already now between March 18th to the 29th. It's 22 hours of meetings. Attending those will be the president, the provost, Daryl DeWald is the EVP of Health Sciences, me, Matt and Chris will staff those. And we've asked Judy McDonald to join us, both wearing her Regents hat, but also wearing her having been the chair of the Faculty Senate hat. So we think that's a good perspective in a year where, frankly, time is short to have a July 1 budget. We need to have some shared governance, and we think Judy will provide a perspective that will be valuable there. Hopefully we'll make these decisions in the month of April, probably, maybe earlier than this, but we're giving ourselves until April the 26th, because that's when we need to turn information over to Chris so that he can load our system that holds that adaptive planning. At our April Board of Regents meeting, we will do another mid-year update through February 29th of where are we for this current fiscal year. If we are ready with the budget, then we can certainly have a conversation about that. I'm just not sure that 2-week turnaround will work for us to be ready to communicate that. Internal communication, will change. Did I do that? Will change until April 30th, and then the month of May is when we want to put together this budget document thing about. So that we have a document that we can use as a companion to our financial statement to articulate this is the financial plan for the year and be available to everyone. And of course, at the Regents retreat, as if you wish, we can have additional discussion about where we ended for 25, but also how we're already thinking about going into fiscal 26. Because we will ask as soon as the budget is complete, do the round with units of, do you expect to use any fund balances next year? Because we have to know at the very beginning of the year, not as the year is going on, because the plans are already well underway. I want to skip over that. You know, Kirk mentioned the West Virginia. I wanted to give you these links. If you hit these links, they are live. They go to the institutions pages where they are talking about their budgets themselves and what they have gone through. These are 5 pretty high profile items. If you read the Chronicle or Inside Higher Ed, you've seen each one of these listed, and they've each addressed it in a different way. You know, Arizona is the one that we are seeing happen in real time right now. They have made aware that they have a $177 million recurring budget deficit. They are asking their units to come forward with a 5, 10, and 15% reduction for next year. So this just will give you some information. And then this last slide here I wanted to include, this is a study that was just released last summer that NACUBA, that's my professional organization, did this in concert with Baker Tilly, an accounting firm, the path to financial sustainability. It's not a very lengthy document, but it speaks to these challenges that higher ed is under right now. I was just speaking with John Walter in the previous meeting, and institutional research has taken a look at that. And John is already looking at where we can add some metrics to fill in some of this information. So this might be one of those things, a tool that we use as we consider our path forward. That's it.
Any questions?
I do have one. I just want to make sure I'm understanding the budget hearings that are upcoming and how the material that you discover there is different from what's being planned for the fall, which I gather is more on the
It's much more
strategic
intensive,
side.
yeah.
And this is a little, but isn't this one, the budget hearing coming up, is that going to have some strategic components as well?
Sure.
Yeah.
And what we're asking for is how does reduction affect you for fiscal 25, the immediate term? Because this new budget starts July 1. I don't think there's the time to do the deeper look into the unit, its value, its outputs, its efficiency, its effectiveness. That's what's
Next fall,
coming.
yeah.
That's much more intensive. And frankly, I think the president was saying this, the process of setting that up is what's really important. You have to agree on the process and what you're looking at so that we don't get to the end of it and make decisions that don't align with the process, because that's where we will lose everyone's support.
But this will get them more in tune with their budgets, and so it should be a good entree into the next level.
I mean, the reality is, again, the timing is short. I mean, we're coming at the end of the fiscal year now, and to do this kind of work just takes a lot more time. Thank you.
I hear you correctly in that there are some that have fund balances.
Yes.
And have we ever at WSU required a percentage of the fund balances to go back into the general fund, if you will, to?
Not that I'm aware of. And that's not uncommon.
But do we need to look at that?
We do need to look at that. It's actually one of the strategic goals that I had for this year, and I haven't been able to spend a lot of time on it.
Because
You know,
those
it's
fund balances
tough.
are generated through how? Are they through folks?
Most are vacancies, not just vacancies. People are supposed to be here. They are not here for whatever reason. I accumulate the dollars because I didn't pay anybody. That's most of it.
It would be I would be very interested to understand what individual department fund balances look like.
Understood. Me too.
That scares me.
Well,
I'm sure it scares a lot of people for a lot of reasons.
Well, it excites me. And the reason why is if you just zoom out and look at our journey from 2020 to to where we are today, recall that we went through a core transformation. And if you had a companion change management plan, you would see the evolution of our process and systems and behaviors. And it's easy to say general fund, it's going to be really hard to do. And that's where accountability really matters, but also the spirit of a team. So I know I have a different mindset on this, but I'm excited to get to a much more evolved state where the strategic plan is clearly funded with the budget. Yeah. And that you can have more agility, more confidence to having a sustainable long-term plan. So that's where I think we're headed. And that's why I'm excited.
And I don't want, fund balances are great. I mean, that is our working capital. We need the units to have those. We just need to understand where they are. And frankly, while all money is green, all money does not spend the same way. And we need to understand, is it restricted or is it not? So that's the deeper work. You also have to be careful about fund balances, reserves, whatever we want to call them. We don't want to have a situation where folks feel like in the month of May, I should spend down every dollar I have because I'm not going to get it back next year. No one wants that.
You use your budget or you lose it.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the high level of transparency in this, just because, as a student, you can only assume so much, but when we have this level of transparency at an administrative level, you can clearly see, how are we doing in a financial standpoint? And when we begin to see cuts, we are able to better see where it's coming from, why we're having cuts of any nature. And we're able to see through a transparent lens how that's being forwarded or how that process is taking place. So I really appreciate that work, especially as a student, because I know it affects both faculty, it affects staffing, but it comes down to students and being able to see, okay, I can see where this is coming from and I can see how this is taking place is amazing in terms of transparency. So I do appreciate that work.
Two things. I think several slides ago, when you showed a little bit of kind of where things are in terms of tuition revenue and stuff coming in, Leslie, if I remember correctly, you have conservatively budgeted that number off of assuming no enrollment growth.
Correct.
And it's not that that's a forecast. It's better always to be conservative. And then we hit our enrollment target. We see where those dollars are. There could be some additional dollars there. And we do intend to do another mass salary increase this next year. That's also embedded, I think, in all those numbers as well.
Yes.
So.
Can I just offer a compliment? I have been so looking forward to this moment. And so I'm really excited. We've done some strategic allocation of dollars to specific things before, and that's been great. But this is, I think, the first time that we've really said we're going to look across the entire enterprise and ask everyone to make asks as well as say where they can make cuts. And then we're going to make strategic decisions around how we do that across the entire enterprise. And I know we're not all the way where we want to be yet, and there needs to be a shared governance model for how to get there, and I respect that 100%. But it's great to be not waiting for perfect to start the process, particularly when we absolutely need to keep operating in a very difficult environment, which all higher ed is in. So I applaud your courage, collective courage, in starting to move forward on this, even though I know it will be difficult and imperfect. But I think it's very, very exciting, and to have some fruit start to be born from all the hard work on the change management side is really, really great. So thank you. Good luck. We're behind you.
That'll be important.
We're just
That will be
behind you.
important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I just want to also add my appreciation for including Regent McDonald in all of the budget hearings. And then Regent McDonald, I want to thank you. I do recall an earlier comment today about how much time I'm asking you to spend this month. It is really important, not only as a member of this group, to have your voice involved and that level of transparency, but certainly your role as a member of the faculty. So Leslie, that was something that you suggested. I'm sure it was in collaboration with President Schultz, and it really makes a difference. So thank you.
All right, more to come on that. So thank you. Those were our 2 information items. Now we're going to shift into our 8 future action items. So just to orient you, future action item discussions. Our first one, Leslie will be joined by Glinda Becker-Fenter and Vice President for Facility Services, Olivia Yang, to present our first future action item, the 2025 to 2027 state capital budget request.
Thank you so much, and thanks, Linda and Olivia. I'm just going to turn it over to Olivia.
Okay, just holler if you can't hear me. Notorious. Not being heard. So I just want to give you a context of the timeline. So we are asking for your review and discussion of our state capital budget request for the 25 and 78.
Louder, please.
Louder?
Yes.
Okay. In April, we hope to get your approval of the request, or if there are any changes from here until April. And from April until September, we will, pending your approval in April, we will be preparing a submittal to the governor's office, and that will lead to the governor's budget. In January 25, the legislature comes to the session and we'll go through the session, House capital budget, and finally the conference budget. And we'll have our budget hopefully when session ends in April. So that's the timeline that we're looking at today. What I'd like to say about this budget is that this is the 3rd biennium where we have intentionally focused the alignment of capital investment with our capital needs. And we look at our capital needs kind of in a dual way, both how facilities support the teaching, research, and service mission of the university, but also how it addresses problems that we have on our facilities capital asset side. So those problems have to do, as you may have heard from me ad nauseum, we have a facilities deferred maintenance backlog that we're working down, almost $2 billion by now. And so we're trying to be very thoughtful and strategic about how we solve that. I'd like to say that what we're doing is we're looking at projects that are distracted. I'm so easily distracted. We're looking at projects that I like to call are twofers. So they move the university forward in terms of its mission, but also addresses the problems that we have. And we do have a lot of those twofer projects. So what you will see here is what you've seen before in the last 2 biennium, a lot of more renovation projects, more projects under 10, so that we can kind of spread the investment a little bit better across the system. And what we like to say is, if we're trying to optimize space, well, the reality is that we are underfunded with O&M money. And so if you have dollars per foot and you can't get more dollars, then maybe you can reduce the square footage so that your dollars per foot start to look a little bit better. And that's always been our push. And so we're trying to consolidate space. It's very difficult, as you can imagine. Space becomes an emotional thing, not just a physical thing. And so we're trying nevertheless to say, have we got a deal for you? It's a smaller space, but it's really better space. And that's been the push in the last 5-6 years. And so those are the sorts of things that we've been doing. One thing is, in the last 2 biennia, we have been pushing towards a $150 million total target, because we believe that that's been kind of what we've been getting. Before that, we would ask for 200 million or so or such, and we would still get about 150. And which is bad enough, but then the priorities get all lopsided. So they'll fund the last item and they won't fund it anymore. So what we've said in the last two biennium and this biennium is, here's our list. We're trying to be responsible and not too greedy, but please fund us based on go down the line. This time, however, we are kind of like, we have a lot of needs, and so we're asking for actually more. So you'll see that the total is 175 instead of the 150, 155, hoping that, having established a track record of being good citizens, that we get a sympathetic audience in the legislature and in the Congress. So as to what's in the budget request now, top and foremost is what we call MCR, building preservation. And what that does is across the system, it looks at where we need to reinvest in renewal of parts of the building. So it's the simple things like a new roof, putting the brick, new, and really it's new mechanical, electrical components, whether it's in the building or campus utility system. That's the first thing. Then it's followed by what we call MCI, which is programmatic renewal. So in support of a program, academic, research, teaching. It's followed by two of what we had called in the past the sustained investment, where we say, here's a project, but by biennium, we're going to do a little bit of that project. And so we have Spokane and Pullman, Spokane Team Health and Pullman Integrated Science, where, so you might have remembered touring Spokane Medicine. That was so we had pre-design with medicine, and now in the current biennium, we're doing demolition of two buildings next to Jensen Bird, which is an older brick building. And so it's design and demolition of the new building, and now we're going to be asking for the construction money for the new Team Health building, as well as we hope to be able to demolish the actual Jensen Bird itself. On the Pullman side, we are asking for design and demolition of Hill Hall in the Pullman campus, so that in the next biennium, we will then be able to ask for construction money to do the new science building. The current biennium, we had asked for money and received money to do renovations at Eastlick and Abelson. They, in addition to upgrading laboratories, also provide a home for people that will be made homeless when Hill Hall comes down. So those are two of those, what we call sustained investment that we're looking at doing over the biennium. We're kind of taking the scope of a project, kind of stretching it out so that we can accommodate more each biennium. And other things that you will see are system-wide improvements to general use classrooms, to the IT, and then there are specific requests on behalf of the different campuses and the different extension centers. And so that's in effect what we're asking for this time. Not that different from what we've asked for in the past. And probably talking too fast here, so.
And I will add one other thing is that with the capital campaign, we started the work with the president's help, Mike Connell and Julie Benson, looking at what the capital requests are from the campaign and making sure that those align with the state request as well.
So happy to take questions.
Olivia, you mentioned that you were, was it demolition for the buildings on either side of Jensen Bird?
There's actually two little buildings on one side of Jensen Bird. We call it the Blue Building. Okay. And there's a little two-story brick annex next to it.
Is there something in the offing of doing something with Jensen Bird, or is that still?
Yeah, we've looked at Jensen Bird for the last
long time,
20 for my entire career at WSU. Every year we would say, oh, what are we going to do with Jensen Bird? And unfortunately, it's a very big building. It's not built to be an academic building. The middle part of the building is actually 7 feet floor to floor because it was used as a warehouse for plumbing supplies, I believe. And so we think the better use is actually to demolish it in a way that honors the legacy of the building in the neighborhood. So in this request, we are asking for construction money for the new team health as well as demolition of Jensen. We are working out, exactly how much demolition, how much we need to do in mitigation to honor the fact that this building has been there for a long time, and then see how we can build it.
Yeah, I didn't think we could demolish it, so I guess you kind of.
We can,
it just,
we could,
it's
just
just-
we always,
It's
yeah,
sticky.
it's the
Yeah.
pressure that we always get from the community
Yeah.
when we try it.
Yeah, there's actually, we have to work with the state Department of Archaeology and Historic Preservation, and we have to work with the city of Spokane. They have requirements for a demolition. They're separate tracks, but we're starting that effort. Thank you. Right now.
I'm glad there's something moving on that.
Yes.
You're making Vice President Dewald smile.
Demolition.
Olivia, I have a question. So with regards to just capacity planning, you've got capital projects in work in process, right? And we're asking for more capital. And maybe it's the question for Glenda, in terms of sharing metrics or data that exhibit our good citizenship in terms of stewards of the money. What is the key metric that the legislatures rely on? Is it performance to budget? Is it on schedule? What is it?
Well, I think the normal,
There isn't one?
not really, but I
No.
think, you get in trouble if you run over budget or you're late. And we try very hard not to do that. You may have heard us talk in the past about accordion scope. As there is more money in contingency available, we would, add more scope. I should, if I may, I came with Joe Klein, and so he's back there. And I like to say he's our chief accordion player. He is actually Assistant Vice President for Capital and Operations Performance, Capital System and Pullman Operations. And so he and his team of project managers, you've met some of them, Jason Berlocker in Vancouver, Eric in Spokane, but he is the one that leads the team and makes these difficult decisions. That's the metric that we go by. We like to also, in the evaluation of projects, we've also looked at the criteria of how does it move the university's mission forward, as well as how can it help us consolidate space so that the O&M dollars that we have can be not so peanut buttered out.
Well, I think in the absence of metrics like that, Regent Ramos, we have some success stories though with the Schweitzer Hall. We're leveraging the state dollar with the fundraised dollar to build the facility. The same thing will happen with Team Health. There's an intent around philanthropy that whether it be for bricks and mortar or for the program that will go in there. Another story I would say with Spokane, the School of Medicine, the dollars that became available to renovate that building, that is a remarkable renovation for that amount of money. I mean, I've done a lot of capital projects for you. I was stunned when I went through there and said, you did this with that? I mean, it was an amazing thing. I don't know how you turn that into the metric, but that is a remarkable renovation.
There's also the demolition of Johnson Hall, 200,000 square feet in Pullman, and now it opens up space for the USDA ARS building. So it's a way for us to, put all the money together and go at the pieces.
I just think there's an opportunity to showcase those stories that demonstrate good capital stewardship. And strategically, those need to be capsulized at the time they're happening and done. And so it's just maybe, and it's also a great way to continue to educate people on what we're doing with capital.
On that note, Leslie, when you work with the state on a, if you do this, we'll do this, or we'll do this, if you do this, is that contingent on you doing that? So
Good question.
If you-
Was Schweitzer contingent?
Well, I remember during the heat dome in July, Chris and I went down to meet with our analysts from OFM. And we said, we think we have donor money. Can we ask for similar? And they said, yeah, sure, we do this all the time at our universities. So what we did internally is we had kind of a checkpoint that said, we need to see this much in pledges. And based on those pledges received, we will move forward and ask for this much in state dollars so that we can say with a straight face to the state, yes, this will be a X to Y match.
So going forward, if we feel pretty good about the health building in Spokane, it's fair to say there are probably prospects in line for that, so we can play that card with the state.
We hope so. And, you know, we're open to different kinds of partnering. We certainly are open to that. Unfortunately, we do have a time deadline at what point, you know, we have to turn a submittal. So we need some of that pretty quickly.
Just if I could, to Regent Primo's comments, when we do individual visits with our legislators, with members that are on that, the capital committees on both the Senate and the House side, we emphasize that we're on time, that we're on budget. And we also make sure when we do building openings and things like that, Olivia and her team show those folks around. So I actually think this is an area we do a really good job. And they know that if they give us dollars, we're going to do what we said we were going to do. It's going to be something they're proud of, and it's going to be impactful on our campus. So part of the reason we can go back and ask for more is because they know we do a good job with what we get. And that's a tribute to our team that handles it. And I don't know how everybody else does in the state, but I think we have a reputation for doing this really, really well.
Can I add one thing? Because I will promote you for sure, but I would just say that a lot of times we like to continue to tell that story as well with our elected officials, both on the state and federal side. And they especially like to hear about the involvement of our stakeholders in supporting that building, that we're not just going in and saying we need the capital for this building, that we're doing this because it's supporting our ag industry, our healthcare, our engineering growth, whatever it might be. And then we have those kind of third-party validators that are also saying the same thing. And that really helps that helps kind of push it forward with our funders as well.
Okay, so we've gone in with a $200 million ask.
175.
170.
Previously.
Oh,
yeah,
before.
this is 175 this year, but previously.
Previously, we've been
over
doing
200.
200 and we get 150. So psychologically, if I'm a legislator, I might think, can't give them everything they want. But you've taken that into account. You've gotten that feedback that, I mean, as Kirk is saying, we're doing what we say we're going to do. We think it's a better strategy to come in closer to the actual number. In this case, the 175.
Well, we're actually pushing what we think we'll get. In my short time observing the capital budgeting process in the state, and I'm not an expert, it seems that in their head, they have a proportion. So, you know, the Big Ten outfit over there gets this much, we get this much, Eastern gets this much, and so on and so forth. Because at the end of the day, it's the debt limit of the state to float bonds. And so corrections get this much, community colleges get this much, and so on. We've seen this actually, the flip side, where one supplemental session, we did not ask for anything. And they called and said, well, we're giving so-and-so this much. What do you want? Well, what can you give us? We'll take whatever you can give us. And so we got a little bit there. So I think there's a notion in the head that they're trying to be fair based on size and other metrics, so that everybody gets kind of their fair share, is what we think. You're wrong.
But that, Regent Pica, that's been before the last major session, we had one of the chairs sit down in Pullman and say, we like what you guys do. You don't submit a whole big list of things you know you're not going to get. You're very focused, it's prioritized. Say, if we ask what number one is, we say it's the top line. Number two is the second one. We're very organized that way. And they say, we appreciate the fact that you do it this way. Keep doing it that way. However, this year we felt we needed to push that up more than we've been asking for in the last several years. And we know that's going to create an opportunity myself and our government relations team to advocate that we think we deserve more than we've been getting in the past. So this is, we've gotten direct feedback from the appropriators that they like the way that we do it and they feel that it's very credible. So there are people that would say, why don't you submit 300 million worth of stuff? The issue in my mind comes down to who chooses what. If we submit this long list, somebody can choose project number 18, and we would say, well, that, we just kind of left it on there. That wasn't really a priority. The way we do it, I think, is really critical on us making choices on priorities as opposed to letting somebody else do it.
So I'm kind of emboldened in this self-promotion, if I could say one way. Especially since Joe Klein is here. So we've been using Design Build a lot, you may have heard. And so for the last 9 years, Joe has been emceeing, facilitating a kind of Design Build forum, is what we call it. And we invite people to come, our contractors and architects to come and tell us what we're doing well, what we're not doing well. And they've gotten very comfortable telling us, what we're not doing well. And so we take their feedback. And so there's a dialogue. But I think what's interesting is that we hit almost 200 attendees. And you have to pay. You have to come to Pullman. Of course, it's easy to come to Pullman, right? Head east, take a ride at Colfax, there you are. So, but a lot of people come. And it's a very good dialogue, but more importantly, I think the fact that when we put out an RFQ, we get responses. So it tells us that doing something right, and so it's not just legislators that think that we're okay. Our partners think we're kind of a good client. So, and that's Joe, Regents, sitting in the back there. So.
Thank you, Joe. and
12 items
thank
to
you,
go. So
Olivia.
shut up
Yeah.
now.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, so our next future action item, Leslie will be joined by Finance and Administration and Deputy CFO Matt Skinner to present the information on the workday contract.
Thank you, Regent Ramos. Good to see everybody. So as Leslie mentioned earlier, we're finishing the end of our current Workday software term that provides our HR, payroll, and finance. How's my level of volume? Like out there, you sound really quiet. Is this okay here? Yeah. Thank you. So we're ending the term of our current Workday contract, and we're negotiating an extension of that contract for 2 5-year periods or a 10-year period. Feel really good about a 10-year period. The cost of changing ERPs is significant. The effort to change that would be significant. So we're very happy to lock in that contract for 10 years. Average cost of that contract per year would be $2.2 million per year.
2.2, because it looks like it's 22.3.
22.3 total 10 years.
Okay.
So about 22.2 million per year. Thank you. That's great call out. So we'll be looking for the board to delegate authority to enter into that contract. Next, please.
Also, Matt entertained different options for this. One would have had the renewal coming up again in 5 years. And we said, let's go ahead and do the 10. One, we're not going to change our system of record that frequently. It just doesn't happen. The other is, we said jokingly, future us will be very happy that this happened. So
Is there a financial benefit of going the 10 years versus the 5?
well, it would reset in 5 years, and so you'd be subject to whatever was going on at the time. And is the likelihood that it would come down? No. So we felt confident going ahead for that. And we think, again, locking that in is the best way to go. We're not going to change the system again.
I think there's a psychological advantage there too of saying.
So that
There's a psychological advantage to that too in saying, if it's not doing what we want, we'll work it out because it's gonna be here for a while. Like it puts a little more impetus on smoothing out whatever isn't doing what we need it to. Yeah, this is here for 10 years. Let's make it work.
On that note, we talked about people, process, and tools with regard to our non-recurring investment for the transformation. Could you just remind everybody that wasn't here before what that non-recurring investment was?
Yeah, thank you. We had a budget of about 35 million in one-time investment to launch the program that covered consulting, implementation time, search staff, and all of the related processes. That included about a 20% contingency, which we actually didn't end up using much of that contingency. So we have a little bit left in those project funds to help us with whatever our next modernization opportunity would be. So one place the pandemic helped us actually is because our consultants didn't travel the last 7 months of the project. So we saved a little money on travel time.
Well, I just want, it's a highlight of just sort of thoughtful investment of our core system. And, you know, the change management of that was tough, given those conditions. And I just want to thank you again for helping streamline, but stabilize it. And now it's becoming a useful tool that we need it to be.
Could I just ask a quick question? In my experience on implementing ERPs, there are multiple additional modules that you can continue to add for efficiencies that often have an additional cost. Do you anticipate that there'll be an ask for more than $22.3 million to continue to sustain this tool?
So we are looking at that. I'll let Matt answer, but we don't have a system of position control in place where the position of the individual follows itself through budget. We need that, and we'll be working on that.
I don't think we need to buy software to do that.
No,
I think
it's just, it is another module, so, yeah.
As you know, as we look ahead, I think we'd have to weigh the cost benefit of additional kind of business solutions. Some places I think we're keeping our eye on is, could we use what you call kind of an e-procurement marketplace to help departments buy their goods and services more quickly? Can you have an ecosystem of pre-competed contracts that they can choose from? There's some cost to create those type of marketplaces. That's been in place at industry for decades, right? That's something we look at. I'm interested in contract management tools someday. If that can help us be more speedy in getting our contracts done and negotiated so we get those services in place. Whether any of those would come again, and those are not at the level of an ERP. It would probably be something that we would just take care of out of our own budgets.
Any other questions? Okay. Our next future action item. So let's see, Jenna's coming back, as well as will be accompanied with the Chancellor, Elizabeth Chilton, and we'll talk about student affairs.
Yes.
Hello, good afternoon again. At this time, we feature action items. We have 3, and 2 of them are going to be presented by one of our program students who will introduce themselves in just a moment. But the 2 that Grant will talk about is the proposed Chinook Student Center mandatory student fee change, as well as the proposed Student Recreation Center mandatory student fee change. So.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Grant Rickard. I am a 3rd-year undergraduate pre-medicine student on the WSU campus. I currently study molecular biology and I work in university recreation as a lead adventure facilitator, and it's my honor to be the chair of the University Recreation Advisory Board. I come before you today to present our Chinook fee increase recommendation for the 2024-2025 academic year. But before we get into it, I want to propose an idea. There's an idea called the 3rd place. And so students find that their first place is their home, maybe it's their dorm, their apartment. Their second place is probably class or maybe where they work. And they seek to find out this 3rd place where they feel they are comfortable, they can relax, and they can collaborate with others. That's beyond those first 2. So with that, we'll get into it. So looking at where it currently stands, the Chinook's current fee is for students enrolled in over 7 credits per semester. They pay $98 per semester in order to access the Chinook. This is only for undergraduate students, as when it was initiated, the Chinook was meant for undergraduate students. However, this fee has not increased since 2017, where the Chinook came to be what we know it as today. And As you've heard and as I've heard from listening, we're facing an issue of declining enrollment and increasing costs due to inflation. So this is why we come to you with a recommendation of increasing the fee. So what this fee supports, over 85% of our undergraduate students access this building every year. This is a keystone place in order for students to not only carry out recreation, but collaboration with other students. And it's no surprise, there's an in-house cafe, there's safe spaces for religious practices, and free gender-neutral bathrooms for students to access. So it's no wonder it's such a popular place on campus. So with our recommendation, the University Recreation Advisory Board has recommended a 5% increase to our $98 fee to bring it to $103 per semester. This will help cover our bond payment for the building and help us maintain our operating hours and student employment. It'll also help us upkeep with the maintenance that comes with running a building of this size and this use. If you had the chance to go on any tours of the campus, all of our first year tours come through this building. It is a highlight. It is LEED certified. It is really a cornerstone of the campus. This recommendation was put forth by the University Recreation Advisory Board, a board made of 16 voting members, 11 of which are students. And not all of these students work within UREC. There's a wide diversity on our board, and I am proud to be the chair of it. So the original referendum called that all fee increases must be passed by an undergraduate ballot incentive. And so that's what we did. The proposed increase was on the ballot May 5th and 6th, and I'm proud to say that we have passed it with a 23% vote from undergraduate students. 88% of those were in the affirmative. When you look at the comparison, last year, 4% of undergraduate students voted. This is over 4 times higher than it has been in the past, and so we are very proud of that. Awesome. And so with this referendum, we also put into stipulation that in the coming future, that initiatives in order to increase the fee must be passed by the ASWSU Senate by a 2/3 majority vote after recommendation from the UREC Advisory Board. So we no longer have to face a general student body ballot. So looking overall, the impacts of what we have in front of us today has allowed us to continue our operations with the Chinook, as well as maintain it and carry us forward into the future with this building. Looking from the student perspective, we can maintain this space and this service to our students that a lot of students find very welcoming. They find this is that their third place on campus. Over 125 student positions are employed in the Chinook building, so it is also very important for our students' financial well-being. Thank you all for your time. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them about it.
I did have a question. Well, congratulations on getting out the vote.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
I'm wondering, because I saw at the Student Rec Center, people handing out postcards, just reminding students to vote. What are the efforts that you all took to, just get students to vote, get them activated? Because the ballot was largely unopposed otherwise. And so I know there was a concern that you wouldn't get that kind of turnout. It's really impressive.
Yeah, it was a team effort for sure. It started in kind of our Zoom call, UREC board meetings, and we really came down to we have to inform our students why this is important. If we tell them to go out and vote, it's up to chance. I mean, that's what we saw with our 4% turnout last year. You have to tell them why it is important for them to have their voice heard on campus. So with that, we had tabling and we had it in the Cub, we had it in front of our SRC, in our Chinook. We really got it out there. We also presented to student employees across campus that are employed by University Recreation. So people who really have their fingers in the dirt of the foundation of University Recreation, specifically the Chinook. And also, I think it worked so well because the Chinook really is that third place for a lot of students. So I think a lot of our students really felt tied into this building, and they had part of themselves in the game of what was up for cuts for this building.
Did you use social media much too?
We did use social media. I actually run the Outdoor Recreation Center Instagram. If you don't follow it, yeah, we put it out there. University Recreation put it out there. We all collaborated. It was a team effort, really. It was a team effort, both in real life and on the social spaces.
Grant, you're incredibly impressive. Thank you for being here with us today. I also just wanted to mention, as a parent with a junior in high school, the napping pods in Chinook, the whole experience in Chinook was apparently the most memorable part of the tour. And so I do agree that the third place and that sense of community is really on display at the Chinook. So thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Appreciate it.
Thank
Hey,
you.
good job presenting. Good eye contact.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Keep that in mind because I have another.
Oh, it's good.
Regent Shetler, do you have a question? No?
Oh, he popped up. I was like,
Yeah, it popped up, but no, I just listening in. Thank you.
I have a personal question about your academic interests
of
in
course.
microbiology. Just where are you heading with your medical aspirations?
Well, I am hopefully going to medical school. So if anyone has ties with James Record, I have to leave honors college, so I have applied through the pathway program there, but I plan to apply as many different places as I can, hoping to give back to rural healthcare. As I am from Eastern Montana, so that's where my heart is. That's where I grew up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
As Grant said, he's has one more presentation, and now we'll switch our third space from the Chinook to our student rec center.
Yes. I'll save you the spiel of me starting out, but this is for the Student Recreation Center increased rate recommendation. I will refer to it as the SRC throughout this presentation, so just keep that in mind. So there we go. So looking at where we stand now, students pay $168 per semester in order to have access to this facility. And I hope you have all had the pleasure of being within this facility. It's quite a building. I mean, we have a pool, we have a weight room, we have places for students to collaborate. We have open rec that draws in hundreds of students per night to participate in these activities. So all students enrolled in 7 or more credit hours have to pay this fee. However, it's a really big building and costs are adding up, as everyone is saying. There's decreased enrollment and increased costs. And with such a big building, there's bound to be maintenance, and that is coming up and rearing its head. So declining enrollment has led us to drop over $1.1 million in the past 5 years. So our recommendation, the UREC Advisory Board has recommended a 4% or $7 increase to this fee, bringing it to $175 per semester per students. The reason we chose such an interesting number is we really wanted to be able to sell it to students and really have them quantify, because a big part of our conversation we had is, if we went up to a student on campus and say, how much do you pay to be part of the SRC? They probably couldn't tell you. So if you say I'm raising it 4%, they can't really quantify that because they don't know where it came from. So this $7, we said, well, if we explain to them it's about the price of an iced coffee with a tip, they'd be like, oh, okay, I can quantify that. I know how much that costs. So this will help cover our $2.48 million bond payment that we face with this building, as well as it'll help us maintain the building, as it is a 23-year-old building. That's older than I am. So there's bound to be. So the Advisory I know.
The Chinook was the bookie.
The Chinook was the bookie, yes.
The bookie to me.
Yeah, it's a 23-year-old building, so there's bound to be repair. Okay, so what does this fee support? So the SRC has welcomes in over 80% of our student body every year. That's a lot of students. We're not talking about just undergrads. We're talking about the entire student base of WSU Pullman. Not only does this building prioritize physical health, but I'm sure you've all heard the studies of how physical health impacts mental health. And we can see that within our building. It has also been shown that this stimulates academic performance, recruitment, and retention, which is a really hot topic, as I've heard here today. So it's an important place for our students, not only for them to get out and work out their stress, but also find what motivates them. So looking overall, with this fee increase, we can see that the SRC will hopefully be able to maintain current operation levels and hours. When you start messing with these hours, students get really upset. So we want to make sure we keep the hours of operation as people format days around it. I mean, maybe it's the one-off day you go to the gym at night instead of the morning, but people budget out certain hours that they expect service to be rendered. And if you switch that up on them, they're not going to be happy. So allowing ourselves to maintain operations and our service level to our students is paramount. as well as maintaining student employment. There's over 350 positions employed at the SRC, so making sure we keep our students' financial well-being in our minds is very important. Thank you again for your time, and I hope you can see how important a building is to our campus and part of a recreation service that prioritizes values such as excellence, sustainability, inclusivity, discovery, and play. Thank you so much.
Oh, no, I think it may need to be in communication.
I know.
Well, I know, I was eyeing your student regent spot.
Yeah.
You should change. Thank you. Great job.
Before you go, when you do find yourself in practice, I do keep this kind of interaction with your patients. I think it'd be brilliant.
Oh, that's my goal. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you. That was great.
So we have one more future action item, and presenting herself coming up is Crystal de los Santos, and so she's going to present about our CUB, our Compton Union Building. All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Crystal de los Santos. I am a second-year student, and I am majoring in Management Information Systems. I currently serve as the chair of the CUB Advisory Board, and I am employed at the Compton Union Building itself as a building manager. So today I'm here to present a crucial overview of the funding situation for the Compton Union Building, also known as the CUB, at our university. So the CUB, which is a vital hub for student activities and services, is funded through a combination of student fees and other revenue sources. Currently facing financial challenges, it is really important that we address the sustainability of the funding model to really ensure the preservation of this key space on campus. The CUB is primarily funded through student fees, with the mandatory fee accounting for about 50% of its revenue. However, it is really important to note that the mandatory fee has not seen an increase since 2008, despite its increasing operating expenses. The bond payment for that 2008 renovation, representing about 60% of its operating expenses, adds to that financial strain as well. Unfortunately, declining enrollment has led to the lowest amount collected in the mandatory fees since 2008. And over the past few years, we have observed a 10% decrease in the annual S&A fee allocation. This decline in revenue, along with the increased operating costs, has led to continuous operating losses. And so to address this financial challenge, the CUB Advisory Board has unanimously proposed an 8.3% increase in the mandatory fee for the academic year 2024-2025, bringing it to about $130 per semester, which is a $10 increase per semester for each student. This increase is really essential to cover that $5.7 million annual bond payment and sustain current operations, such as operating hours, event support, maintenance, custodial support, and student employment. So this fee increase is not just a financial necessity, it directly impacts the services and spaces that the students rely on for their academic and extracurricular needs. The CUB supports many registered student organizations, departments, cultural centers, the Cougar Food Pantry, and many events, such as the new Cougar orientation, multicultural banquets and graduations, and many other events. Our institutional goals revolve around maintaining the CUB at its current operational levels to contribute significantly to student retention and success. This includes meeting bond payments, continuing with necessary maintenance, and replacing equipment to ensure that the facility remains a thriving hub for our university community. Failure to address these current funding challenges will consequently result in decreased support and services for these students. It would jeopardize spaces and services that students expect and demand, potentially affecting approximately 80 student positions annually in the CUB student employment. In conclusion, the CUB Advisory Board recognizes the importance of funding the CUB and has expressed support for additional increases in the future. This proposed increase is not just a financial necessity, but a strategic investment in the continued success and vibrancy of our university communities. Thank you for your time. I now look forward to any questions you have.
Do you know, when the bond is fully paid?
I
What year
believe
it
it's
is?
2035. 2039.
Long way off then.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself and thank you for being here today. We're very excited whenever we have students that are able to share the table with us.
I was born in Manila, Philippines. Moved to Hawaii when I was just a baby, so I was raised on the Big Island of Hawaii in Kona. I decided, I believe you're Hawaiian as well.
I am.
I saw your last name and I was like, that's why.
I was born in Philippines.
Right, so.
I also know that.
Right here.
But yeah, I decided I wanted to get off that small island, see what's out there, and here I am. I ended up in Pullman. Made a lot of good friends there, found a great community. Just hosted Filipino Culture Night on Saturday. Huge success. Had a lot of people there, and it was just a great time.
Nice job.
Great job. Well done.
Good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jenna. Okay, so our next future action item is the WSU Vancouver Technology Fee Committee allocations. And joining Leslie next is our Vancouver Chancellor, Mel Metson.
Who refuses to get up.
It will take longer to get there than it would take to get through the item.
Yeah,
I promise.
This item is the placeholder to have the discussion at the April meeting. The committee back at the Vancouver campus is doing the work now to determine the allocations, and we'll bring that forward at the next meeting.
Okay, so we're moving on to debt policy.
Yep.
Great,
And
so.
Matt will join me again.
Yes. So our next future action item then is to go over the proposed revision to the Board of Regents debt management policy.
Thank you, and Matt will lead this one. I just wanted to say this, when we took this on, we actually thought that the revisions would be a lot more thorough. We were looking at the resolution that underlies our ability to issue debt and found that we actually did not need to update that to the extent that we thought we did. So this is more of a housekeeping and cleanup review. It's also to give us more ability to take advantage of any refunding opportunities that may present themselves. Or unfortunately, with the interest rate environment we're in now, with interest rates being so high, those are less opportunities to do that. But because we want to be able to act fast whenever those do arise, and we do have one that we're entertaining at the moment, and we'll be moving forward this spring, we just want to be able to do that, and we want to clear up the policy to make that possible.
Great, thanks, Leslie. So a few reminders, the state law authorizes the Board of Regents to issue bonds, notes, or other forms of indebtedness on behalf of the university's priorities. And then the board, through its Board of Regents policy number 5, sets the parameters that we work under, designated to Leslie as our CFO. We had revised this policy since 2015, so it seems like a good time to come in. As Leslie mentioned, really more of just some minor refreshes and housekeeping to make things current. I'd like to just recognize, if I could, John Carlo. We all see him as the Atrons Athletic CFO. He runs our Treasury Services team. He and his team, along with Canel Gates, who's the University Bond Counsel, and Public Financial Management, our independent financial advisor, helped us craft this policy and changes. So we're in good hands legally with what we're proposing here. Some highlights you'll see as you have opportunity to review the proposed changes really fall into 4 areas. We wanted to highlight specifically that the board has delegated authority to the president or his designee to issue those refunding opportunities that Leslie mentioned. I want to clarify that operating and capital type contracts or leases are not part of a debt policy, but instead those fall under other delegations and policies that the board has in place. I want to simplify some of the saving thresholds for when we do a refinancing or refunding, so we can act quickly in the market to capture real savings for the university. That is important still, that we generate real savings through those refundings. And finally, as we think about that debt report that we provide to the board once a year, I want to give some flexibility to both the executive vice president and the board to ask for other metrics or ratios that you think would be useful as we continue to monitor our debt capacity and performance moving forward. So we made some subtle changes there to that portion of the policy. That's our summary on those proposed changes.
Janet, or Is there anything in those changes? You mentioned that you had your eye on some way of refinancing. Is there anything we need to do based on
Refunding.
at this meeting as opposed to waiting until the next
No.
meeting?
No, we don't.
No, we're good. Thank you for asking that though.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you. Now, we're on our last future action item. And Leslie will be joined by Danielle Hess and Olivia again to go over the Washington Administrative Code 50450, which is the small works roster and the proposed revisions.
Danielle's here, but she's gonna hang back for this one. This one will be Olivia. This one, if you pulled it up in the board portal, you saw there is a large amount of red ink in this one where it has been revised. So Olivia will explain what we were changing.
Yes, so we're here to ask you to approve the WAC, which is Washington Administrative Code. That section of the WAC that governs the policies for how we would implement the small work law. The reason is louder, shout. The reason we're doing this is that if I could just back up and give you some more context. Some of you may know or have heard us talk about the work we're doing to support diverse and small businesses across the state. So in 2022, we provided a report that talks about the barriers for diverse and small businesses. After the report was done, we actually did two things, we being this group called CPARB, Capital Project Advisory Review Board, formed by the state to advise the legislature on public works issues, and I'm representing higher ed in that group. So what we did after the report was done is two things, working with OMWBE to develop a state certification for state small businesses, companion to the federal. It's not exactly the same because, the federal idea of a small business is really big. So, but we have now a state certification for small business, and we completely revamped the small works roster so that it would also, in addition to being an efficiency thing for public owners wanting to do construction, it would also open the door and make it easier for small businesses to get their start in doing construction. And so the WAC then, I back up. Both of those things have changes in the RCW, but because of the time needed to operationalize both of those issues, both of those statutes take effect July 1, 2024, this year. And so we are revising the WAC to accommodate the fact that we will now have a new RCW on the small work roster. And that's really the background, and that's why you see all the red ink, because we made a lot of changes to the WAC to further simplify the process for us doing small work roster. Make sense?
Thank you. This is pretty, it's a great idea.
Yes, well, you like it.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'm just gonna say, as an OMWBE certified small business, this is huge. This makes a serious difference, and it is activating the values in the way in which we're working. So
Yeah.
thank you for your leadership.
Okay. It's really minority certified, women's certified, except it's race and gender neutral. The other aspects about annual gross receipts and personal net worth are the same. And so if you're a minority or women-owned certified business, you're going to automatically become a state certified business in that category. So that we think that would be helpful. Okay.
Awesome.
No, I have one more.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, so we're shifting from our future action items to our action items. And we've got 6 of those we'll go through. And the first action item will be presented again by Leslie and Spokane Chancellor Darrell Duvall. We're going to talk about the proposed academic year 2024-2025 tuition rates for the Elson S. Boyd College of Medicine.
Thank you. And I'll just lead off by saying this material is the same as was presented at the Seattle meeting. What we have added, though, is the input from the student groups. We did a survey of the College of Medicine students via a QR code to have them say, how do you feel about a 3% increase? To place frame, remember, we started our discussion this year with thinking about a 10% increase for the incoming cohort and a lower increase for the second, third, fourth year. We also modeled what a 5% increase would be across the board, and then ultimately came back to a 3% based on the debt load that these students are carrying. To no surprise, students would like not to have their tuition increased. And Daryl could speak to more. They're concerned about affordability. The change is $1,227 per year. It's a 3% increase. Only 11% of students did respond to the survey, though. And what we have recommended that we do is continue with the increase, moving that forward, but provide more opportunity and insight into what the College of Medicine budget looks like and why this increase is needed at a future meeting. You know, for the ASWSU group, Chris Jones and I presented to that group, and we were talking about the tuition increase a lot more holistically, a lot of information about the budget, and we're going to offer that same to the College of Medicine.
I think Leslie covered it well, and you've seen the material, and you've seen the feedback, you've seen the comparisons in terms of debt load. You see the impact on the students. So if you have questions, glad to entertain any questions that you have.
We noticed, was the feedback in person?
It was a QR code. It was an electronic survey.
It was they wanted to reach out across the entire system because the students are at 4 different campuses. So it was done.
I see, you know, the list is community-based medical school, which is a good comparison, but what is the University of Washington's fee? I know they're in a different category.
Yeah, they're significantly higher. The University of Washington has increased their tuition over the last several years quite a bit. I don't know precise numbers.
It'd be interesting to look at that as a comparison since they're
It's
in our
significantly
state.
lower than, so they've increased theirs a lot. Their students have also been very vocal about those increases. More so.
Can they enter the transfer portal?
No, I do appreciate the feedback loops that we're really trying to listen to, right?
Yes.
So, you know, we have a need a problem that we're trying to solve together. And need more responses, but
yeah.
Sorry to say.
The tuition at UW is $54,684 for this year, compared to our current year $40,891. So it's nearly $15,000. No, I'm saying it's current year.
Just to throw a thought out there, I really appreciate the survey and being open to student response. I think as you collect student response, even though it was 11%, being able to kind of flip that back and provide information, just like Leslie was saying, and at least provide the options of, okay, here's where we're at. This is where we need to be as the College of Medicine. But here are our options, and continue to highlight those options so that students know that while we're moving forward with an increase of institution, College of Medicine, here are our options, and we're going to continue to support you through this with the resources we have. And we just continue to vocalize that and make sure students know the resources that are available to them.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you'll see there's an articulation. This is for career, and then they're advising while they're there. So there's specific reasons for this increase. It's not just that there's inflationary adjustments, but if you look at the way our community-based medical school is established, being in those different communities is costly because we have to have staff, colleagues, and leadership at each of those sites, so the clinical campuses. And we're just trying to adjust to that so that they're adequately supported. Thank you. Yes, we're trying.
And increases aren't unique. I know it's not unique to just our College of Medicine, but as we continue to move forward and continue to add the structure and infrastructure for our institution, just continue to remind students of the options, which is something we're doing, and I just want to continue to highlight that, so.
It's good. I would mention that as we modeled, as much as a 10% increase, we did seek some informal, response, and that was clear that they wanted us to revise the way that we're approaching. One of the other things that we're, assertively, going after is additional scholarshiping funds, endowments, and one-time commitment to scholarships.
Okay. No further questions. Our next action item will be the WSU Pullman proposed academic year 2024-2025 housing and dining rates. And so we're going to ask Elizabeth to help host this, along with Jenna's coming back and Sean Green.
Jenna and Sean.
Thank you very much. In January, we came before you and had one of our students, Sophie, who served as our chair of our Housing and Dining Advisory Board. And she presented the information with regard to an increase for housing and dining rates with a unanimous vote from the Housing and Dining Board. And also presented the structure with regard to the 4-tier rate. And so today we come to you with regard to presenting and pass the future action and into action to see if you have any questions or any further information. And I'd like you to meet Sean Green, if you recall. Also, is our Associate Vice Chancellor.
And it was the focus and goal of the students to maintain that the entry points for our tiered system see the lowest increases, and that our increases were geared more towards the higher end amenities and services that our students provided. We also had market demand that suggests that the demand would be willing to pay those increases as well.
Okay. Take action on that tomorrow. Thank you. Our next topic, we'll invite Leslie back, and is Tony in the room?
He's
on
right
my
there.
area.
You saw his race helmet just a moment ago.
We'll be joined by Tony Opheim, and we'll talk about the undergraduate technology fee recommendations.
I'm just gonna turn it over to Tony.
Okay, thank you for your time and attention. What I'm here to seek the action is to approve the allocation of the approximately $500,000 student fee allocation request across a number of projects. The one thing that I will add that is not here is that the students continue to amaze me. I've been with them since the very beginning, back in 2015, 2016, when this was created. And they continue to impress me with the level of discipline and rigor that they apply to the evaluation. It certainly makes my role, ex officio role, very easy. And even to the point where they had, the bar was so high that there was a number of proposals that they chose not to fund or to fund totally, and even to the point where they are going to carry forward to the next committee almost $139,000. So that, I think that is worth noting, and I applaud that.
Any questions? Thank you, Tony. We'll take action on that tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, we have the two action items that we'll invite Danielle to come back and present regarding the Washington Administrative Code revisions that we had looked at in January.
Yep, I can be pretty quick because nothing has changed since the last meeting. We've got 2 WAC revisions for action tomorrow. One is the practice and procedure, and it basically, the proposed amendment removes the Washington-specific licensure requirement for individuals representing people in administrative hearings, basically making the 2 WACs consistent. The second one is the health and safety regulations, and we're just making some improvements there, adding some express authority for security screening, including metal detection, video security systems, authority to bar reentry. We reworked the clear bag policy to include infant supplies and allow WSU officials about whether to implement it, basically made it more system-wide. So it's everything you've seen before, and it should be pretty straightforward. Thank you.
All right. Without questions, we'll move forward to our last action item. Olivia's coming back. Thank you, Olivia. Just a reminder, we looked at this also. We, at the WSU Pullman campus, the Wallon, my tongue is tired. College of Engineering and Architecture, Schweitzer Engineering Hall Design.
And we are joined by our interim dean. Elizabeth, would you like to introduce him?
Yes,
He's on
Partha Pandey, interim dean for the Boylan College of Engineering and Architecture. Hello, Partha. Hopefully. Well, she's really not.
I know you don't.
Muted.
Go ahead.
Well, you saw the design presentation in January of the Schweitzer Engineering Hall. My brain is tired. It's 80 million, student success. Partially donor funded, partially state funded. We are here to ask for your approval of the design. Assuming we get the approval, we hope to start construction after graduation. I know that it is on a parking lot. We have outreach to everyone we can think of about the ramifications. We work with the transportation office to understand where everybody could park instead. And so that's kind of have the site plan on its way as well. Happy to take questions from anyone.
All right, hearing none, we're excited to take action on that tomorrow. Thank you. We have some written reports in the board books as well, the major capital projects list, the contracts executed under delegated authority, real estate transactions executed under delegated authority, and I would encourage you all to ask any questions of our team here if you have any. But this concludes the Finance and Administration Committee meeting. I'll turn it back over to Chair Schauer.
Thank you. I am pleased with the timing too. We covered a lot and we again are early. So thank you. Thank you for participating, Leslie, in literally every action item, I think, and just being up here the whole time. Thank you. At this time, I am going to conclude the Board of Regents meeting. We will reconvene for our regular meeting tomorrow, Friday, March 8th at 9 a.m. Those that are gathering for a meal tonight, the board will meet at 5:45 and we'll invite the rest of our leadership team at 6:30. So thank you all. Great day. It's really good day. Well done.